Tonight we begin a gentle journey into the timeless wisdom of Zen, not through heavy philosophy, but through calm stories and simple truths that speak directly to the heart. These lessons aren't about effort or belief. They're gentle reminders of the peace that has always been within you. Before we begin, take a moment to notice where you are and what time it is. Feel the quiet of this moment. The teachings we'll explore tonight have been passed down through centuries, not as commandments, but as gentle invitations to notice what is already here. Each Zen story is like a quiet hand pointing toward the moon. It doesn't give you the moon itself, it simply shows you where to look. Zen teaches us that peace is not something to chase or earn. It's not hidden in the future or locked away in distant lands. It lives right here, in this very breath. The calm you seek is not far away. It's as close as your willingness to stop resisting what is. When you let go of the fight with this moment, a soft stillness naturally unfolds. Everything you need to rest deeply has always been here waiting to be seen. So take a deep, unhurried breath. Let the air move slowly, in and out. Allow your body to soften as we begin this journey together. One of Zen's most freeing insights is its way of understanding the mind. We often imagine our minds as tools. We must control machines that should function perfectly on command. But Zen suggests something much gentler. The mind is not a machine. It's more like the open sky. The sky doesn't resist the clouds or try to stop the rain. It allows storms to come and go. It lets the sunlight appear and fade. Through all of it, the vastness of the sky remains untouched, open, and endless. Your mind works in much the same way. Thoughts move through like drifting clouds. Feelings rise and fall like weather. Sensations appear and fade like passing rain. And beneath all this change, awareness, the true sky of your being, remains still and spacious. When we stop trying to control the weather of the mind and instead rest as the sky itself, peace begins to bloom naturally. Long ago, in a monastery by the sea, there lived a monk named Tao. He often felt frustrated by his restless thoughts. During meditation, his mind wandered endlessly. During his work, he scolded himself for losing focus. "My mind is my greatest enemy," he would say. "It never listens. It refuses to stay still." One day, the teacher of the monastery, Master Genzo, invited Tao to sit with him on a high cliff overlooking the waves. They sat in silence for a long time, simply watching the ocean breathe. After a while, the master asked softly, "What do you see?" Tao replied, "I see the ocean." "Tell me," said the master, "is the ocean trying to control its waves?" Tao thought for a moment. "No, the waves just happen. They are part of what the ocean is." "And does the ocean grow angry when waves rise and fall?" the teacher asked. Tao smiled faintly. "No, that would make no sense." The master nodded gently. "Then why do you become angry when thoughts rise and fall in your own mind?" At that moment, something in Tao relaxed. He realized the truth his teacher had been pointing toward all along, that his mind was not the enemy, but the ocean itself. Its movements were natural, never meant to be controlled, only witnessed. And for the first time, he felt truly still. As Tao sat beside his teacher, the sound of the waves became his teacher too. Each one rose from the deep, reached its peak, and gently dissolved back into stillness. For the first time, Tao noticed that the ocean never clung to a single wave. It didn't hold on to what was gone, and it didn't hurry what was yet to come. It simply allowed everything to move in its own time. That evening, Tao returned to his small meditation hall. He sat cross-legged on the floor, closed his eyes, and breathed quietly. Thoughts still came as they always had, but this time he did not fight them. He let them rise, drift, and fade like waves returning to the sea. And in that gentle allowing, he discovered something vast and unshakable, a silence that had been waiting beneath every sound, a peace that had never truly left. Zen does not promise a life without storms. It teaches us how to sit calmly while they pass, to see that we are not the storm, we are the sky in which the storm unfolds. So as you listen tonight, remember this: nothing you feel, no thought you think, can ever stain the vastness of your being. Awareness itself remains pure, like the open sky even when thunder rolls through it. Let that awareness expand now. Feel your breath deepening, your shoulders loosening. There's nothing to fix, nothing to chase. The peace you seek is not something you earn, it's what you return to when all striving stops. Many years after his awakening, Tao became a teacher himself. Students came from distant temples to learn from him. One day, a young monk named Taro approached, his face heavy with disappointment. "Master," he said, "no matter how much I meditate, my mind keeps wandering. I try to silence my thoughts, but they grow louder. I feel like I'm failing." Tao smiled, remembering his own struggles. He invited Taro to walk with him through a nearby bamboo grove. The wind was blowing gently, and the tall stalks swayed and creaked in rhythm. After a while, Tao asked, "Tell me, Taro, do you hear how the bamboo sings with the wind?" "Yes," Taro replied softly. "Do you think the bamboo blames itself for moving?" Tao asked. Taro looked puzzled. "No, master. It's only bending because the wind moves through it." Tao nodded. "The same is true for your mind. Thoughts move because the breath of life passes through you. You are not failing. You are simply alive." Taro stood silently listening to the rustling bamboo. In that sound, something clicked within him, a moment of clear seeing. He realized that peace was not the absence of thought, but the quiet space that allows thought to come and go freely. As night fell, the two monks sat together beneath the stars. The bamboo grove whispered, the sea murmured in the distance, and the moon shone upon their faces. "Master," said Taro, "if peace is already here, why do we still seek it?" Tao smiled gently. "Because a fish may live its whole life in water and never realize it's swimming. Our practice is not to find water, but to notice it." And so they sat in silence, not as teacher and student, but as two beings resting in the same vast ocean of awareness. Now as you rest, you too can let your breath guide you home to that quiet ocean within you. You don't need to stop your thoughts or control your mind. Just watch, softly, as everything moves through. Let this truth sink in. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the space in which they arise and dissolve. The sky, the ocean, the stillness beneath it all. Take one more deep, gentle breath. Inhale peace. Exhale resistance. And feel yourself merging with the quiet wisdom that has been here all along. Days passed peacefully at the seaside monastery. Morning bells echoed across the cliffs. Birds sang over the ocean breeze. And each day moved like a soft breath rising and falling, coming and going. Tao often began his morning sitting quietly by the garden pond, watching the reflection of clouds move across the still water. One morning, as the sun climbed slowly above the horizon, a sound of shattering porcelain broke the calm. It was young Taro again. He had dropped his favorite teacup. When Tao arrived, he found the boy frozen in silence, staring at the pieces scattered across the stone path. His eyes were filled with regret. "Master," Taro whispered, "I broke it. I didn't mean to. It was my favorite one." Tao knelt beside him and picked up one of the larger fragments. He turned it over in his palm and smiled softly. "Tell me," Tao asked, "did this cup know it would one day break?" Taro looked confused. "What do you mean, master?" "When the potter made this cup," Tao said, "he shaped it knowing that one day it would crack or fall or fade away. Every cup is born with its ending already within it. The potter doesn't mourn this truth. He accepts it as part of the beauty." Taro stared at the broken cup, his breath trembling, as if he were holding back tears. Tao continued, "Everything we love, everything we touch carries the same truth. Even the sunrise disappears. Even our breath changes and moves on. To cling tightly is to suffer. To let go is to see clearly." He gently placed the broken piece on the ground and added, "The cup was already broken. We were simply waiting to see when." For a long moment, they sat together in silence. The waves crashed distantly against the rocks below. The wind brushed past their robes, and in that silence, Taro's sadness slowly softened into stillness. He realized something he had never understood before, that impermanence was not a punishment, but a reminder to love things while they last. To sip tea with gratitude, knowing that the cup, the tea, and the hands holding it are all part of a single, fleeting miracle. That evening, Tao spoke to all the monks in the meditation hall. He said, "When you breathe in, the air fills you with life. When you breathe out, you release what no longer belongs to you. Every breath is a small letting go, and this simple rhythm teaches us what eternity truly means, not something unchanging, but something constantly renewing." He paused, looking at the flickering candle before him. "Do not fear the moment things change," he said. "The leaf that falls feeds the earth. The setting sun gives birth to night. What you lose is never lost. It simply takes another form." The monks listened quietly, their faces soft in the candlelight, each one feeling the truth move gently through them like a breeze. Later that night, Taro swept up the broken pieces of the teacup. He placed them in a small wooden box and set it beside his mat. Every morning afterward, he would glance at it before beginning his meditation. At first, it reminded him of loss, but soon it began to remind him of gratitude for the mornings he was given, for the tea that warmed his hands, for the simple breath that kept returning again and again. The broken cup became his teacher. One day, Tao noticed the box and smiled. "You've made peace with it," he said. Taro nodded. "It no longer feels broken to me, Master. It feels complete, just in another way." Tao's eyes softened. "That is the heart of Zen," he said, "to see that nothing truly disappears. It only changes its form as clouds become rain and rain becomes the sea." Now, as you listen in this quiet hour, allow yourself to remember something in your own life that has changed or ended. Perhaps a dream, a season, or a relationship. Take a breath and whisper softly in your heart, "It was beautiful while it lasted." Feel how light you become when you stop resisting what is gone. Notice how peace returns when you stop asking the moment to stay. Each breath, each heartbeat is here only once, and then it becomes part of everything else. This is the mystery of life. Nothing is ever truly lost. It simply continues in another form, flowing quietly through the great ocean of existence. Take one more long, unhurried breath. Let your body rest deeper into the ground beneath you. The world will keep changing, but the stillness within you, the awareness watching it all, remains untouched. And as you drift into sleep tonight, remember the lesson of the broken teacup, that peace comes not from holding on, but from trusting the flow of life exactly as it is. Seasons passed gently at the seaside monastery. The waves kept their rhythm, the bamboo swayed with the wind, and each morning began with the soft sound of bells echoing through the mist. Tao grew older, and his hair turned silver like moonlight, but his eyes still shone with the same quiet clarity as the ocean. He no longer spoke much during the days. He found that silence often said more than words ever could. One afternoon, a new student arrived at the monastery, a young woman named Lin, full of questions and restlessness. She bowed deeply and said, "Master, I have read many teachings, but I still do not understand what Zen truly means. Is it peace? Is it wisdom? Or is it nothingness?" Tao smiled and invited her to join him for tea. They walked slowly to the small tea house hidden behind the garden. The air smelled of pine and rain. Inside, everything was simple: a wooden table, 2 cups, and a single pot steaming gently. Without a word, Tao began to prepare the tea. The only sounds were the soft bubbling of water and the delicate clink of porcelain. Lin watched closely, waiting for an explanation, a lesson, a riddle, a hint, but none came. He poured the tea carefully into her cup until it was nearly full. Then he kept pouring. The tea spilled over the edges, flowing across the table. Startled, Lin cried out, "Master, the cup is full. No more can fit." Tao looked at her with calm eyes and said, "Like this cup, your mind is also full of ideas, beliefs, and expectations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" Lin lowered her gaze, her face flushing with realization. She sat silently as Tao wiped the table and refilled the cup, this time only halfway. He handed it to her and said, "Now there is space not just for tea, but for understanding." They sat quietly, sipping their tea. The wind moved softly outside, and somewhere in the distance, a bird called out before disappearing into the forest. After a while, Lin asked gently, "Master, is emptiness the goal of Zen?" Tao shook his head. "Emptiness is not a goal," he said softly. "It is the space where everything is already allowed to exist. Without space, there could be no cup, no tea, no sound, no silence. We fear emptiness because we think it means loss. But in truth, emptiness is what makes all things possible." He pointed to the teacup in Lin's hands. "This cup holds tea only because it is empty inside. If it were full of clay, you could not drink from it. The same is true for your mind. Only when it becomes open can wisdom fill it." Lin sat very still, listening not only to his words, but also to the quiet between them. For the first time, she began to notice the silence around her, the pause between the sound of the wind, the stillness between one heartbeat and the next. She realized that the silence wasn't empty after all. It was alive, vast, gentle, and endlessly deep. Tao smiled faintly, sensing her understanding. He said, "When you truly see emptiness, you see that nothing is separate. The sound of the waves, the warmth of the tea, the silence between your breaths, all of it is one continuous dance. The space between things is not nothing. It is everything." The two sat together in silence once more, drinking their tea slowly, each sip carrying the taste of stillness. When Lin finished her cup, she placed it on the table and bowed. Her eyes were calm now, not because she had found all the answers, but because she had stopped asking the wrong questions. She finally understood that Zen was not something to learn, but something to notice in the pauses, in the quiet, in the simple space that allows all of life to unfold. Now, as you listen in this peaceful hour, notice the space around you, the space between your breaths, the space between thoughts. That quiet space is not empty. It is the foundation of peace. Every sound you hear, every sensation you feel, appears within it, lives for a moment, and then fades back into it. The mind does not need to chase silence. It simply needs to stop filling it. Breathe deeply. Notice the stillness waiting beneath every sound. The same stillness that lived in the tea house. The same stillness that flows through every moment of your life. As Dao watched Lin leave the tea house, he whispered to himself, "The cup is empty, and yet it holds the whole sky." And in that gentle truth lies the heart of Zen, that what seems like nothing is actually the space in which everything beautiful begins. Weeks turned into months, and the rhythm of the monastery continued like the breath of the sea, steady, patient, and timeless. The morning bells still sang through the mist. The monks moved quietly along the stone paths, and the ocean wind carried the scent of pine and salt. Lin had been living there for some time now. She had learned to find peace in silence, to see beauty in stillness, and to notice the sacred in simple things, the way sunlight fell across the floor, the way raindrops gathered on the edge of a leaf, the way breath moved in and out without effort. One morning, as she swept the garden path, she heard a faint rustle behind a row of bushes. When she looked closer, she found a small bird lying on the ground, its wing bent awkwardly, trembling with pain. She knelt down slowly, her heart tightening. The bird's eyes fluttered with fear, but it was too weak to move. Lin carefully scooped the tiny creature into her palms. It felt warm and fragile, its heartbeat quick and frightened. She carried it inside and placed it on a small piece of cloth. All day she tended to it, feeding it a few drops of water, whispering softly so it would not be afraid. As the sun set, Dao entered the room and watched silently. After a while he asked, "Why do you care for this bird so deeply, Lin?" She looked up and said, "Because it's suffering, Master. I can't ignore it." Dao nodded. "And do you know where that feeling comes from?" Lin thought for a moment and said, "From my heart." Dao smiled. "Yes, the same heart that feels peace can also feel compassion. They are not different. Peace without compassion is empty. Compassion without peace is restless. Together they form the mirror of awakening. Days passed, and the little bird slowly healed. It began to move its wing again, fluttering weakly but with hope. Each morning, Lynn would sit beside it during her meditation, listening to its tiny breaths mix with her own. One day, Tao joined her and said, "Tell me, Lynn, what do you see when you look at this bird now?" Lynn smiled. "I see life delicate, but strong. I see courage." Tao asked softly, "And do you love it?" "Yes, Master," Lynn said. "I love it deeply." Tao nodded. "Then you have understood the heart of Zen. When you care for even the smallest being, you are caring for the whole universe. Compassion is not a feeling we create. It is the natural fragrance that arises from understanding." He picked up a fallen feather and held it to the light. "See this?" he said. "When the wind blows, the feather moves. The feather does not choose to dance, the air moves through it. In the same way, compassion moves through us when we are open. It is not ours. It is life expressing itself through a soft heart." A few days later, the bird was strong enough to fly. Lynn carried it outside, back to the garden where she had found it. The morning air was cool and still. She opened her hands slowly. For a moment, the bird hesitated, as if unsure of the wide sky before it. Then with a soft flutter, it lifted itself upward, a streak of movement against the clear blue. Lynn watched it rise higher and higher until it disappeared into the horizon. A quiet joy filled her chest. Not the excitement of possession, but the tenderness of release. Tao stepped beside her. He said, "The highest form of love is to let things be free. When you give freedom to others, you give peace to yourself." Lynn nodded, her eyes moist. "I understand now, Master. The same stillness I feel in meditation, it also lives in kindness, in every act of care." Tao smiled softly. "Yes," he said, "compassion is the silence of the heart made visible. It asks for nothing in return. It simply shines." That night, Lynn sat in the meditation hall alone. The candles flickered gently, their light reflecting across the polished floor. She closed her eyes and felt her breath flow slowly in and out. For a long while, there were no thoughts, only a gentle warmth spreading through her chest, like sunlight through water. In that stillness, she saw that compassion was not separate from awareness. It was awareness with love. To see clearly was to love deeply. She realized that every being, every tree, every wave, every bird was part of the same vast, breathing whole. And in that realization, her heart opened wider than it ever had before. The next morning, Tao called all the monks together. He looked at them with gentle eyes and said, "When you sit in silence, do not close your heart to the world. When you help the world, do not lose your silence. Wisdom and compassion are two wings of the same bird. Only together can they fly." He paused, his gaze turning toward the sea. "Do not seek enlightenment as a distant light," he said. "It is here in your next breath, in your kindness, in the way you lift something fragile and let it heal." The monks bowed their heads, and the wind moved softly through the courtyard, as if carrying his words into every corner of the earth. That evening, Lynn stood again by the ocean cliffs, watching the waves roll in and out, just as they always had. She felt the same silence she had once feared, the same stillness she had once chased. Now, it felt like home. A single thought rose gently in her mind. Everything changes, but love remains not as a feeling, but as the quiet presence behind all things. And as the sky darkened into night, she bowed deeply to the sea, to the wind, and to the vastness of life itself. The sound of the waves was her teacher's voice, now soft, infinite, and eternal. As you listen now, feel your own breath rise and fall like the ocean. Each inhale brings you peace. Each exhale releases what you no longer need. The compassion that moved through Lynn lives within you too. It's the quiet warmth in your chest, the gentle whisper that says, "You are not separate from the world, you are part of its heartbeat." Rest in that truth. Let the rhythm of your breath carry you into peace. The story may end here, but the stillness it reveals, it never ends. Seasons changed once again around the monastery by the sea. The mornings grew softer, and the air began to carry a quiet chill. Leaves turned gold before drifting silently to the ground. The waves, too, seemed slower, calmer, as though mirroring the stillness of those who lived nearby. Master Tao had grown frail. His steps were slower now, his voice softer than the wind that brushed the temple walls. Yet his eyes still carried that same unshakable peace, the kind that comes from a lifetime of seeing clearly. The monks had noticed he no longer walked far from his quarters. He spent much of his time sitting near the old pine tree that overlooked the sea, and often Lin sat beside him in silence, just listening to the world breathe. One afternoon, Lin brought Tao a cup of tea. The sky was painted with the colors of dusk's soft orange fading into violet, the horizon glowing where the ocean kissed the light. Tao took a slow sip and smiled. "Ah," he said softly, "the tea tastes just like the wind today." Lin laughed gently, sitting beside him. For a while they said nothing, only the sound of waves filled the silence between them. Finally, Tao spoke. "Lin," he said, "our lives are like this tea, warm for a moment, fragrant, then gone. But the cup remains, ready to hold the next pour. What we call death is not an ending, but an emptying, a making of space for something new to be filled." Lin looked at him with quiet sadness. "Master," she whispered, "I don't want you to go." Tao smiled kindly. "My dear, where could I go? The sea never leaves the sky. It only changes its form. The body may fade, but truth never dies. You will find me in the sound of the waves, in the silence before your thoughts, and in the kindness that moves your hands." That evening, Tao asked all the monks to gather in the meditation hall. Candlelight flickered on their faces as they sat in deep stillness. Tao's voice was faint, yet it carried the weight of timelessness. "My friends," he began, "we spend our lives searching for peace, but peace is not something we gain, it's something we remember. It has always been here, beneath every joy and every sorrow." He paused, taking a slow breath. "When I am gone, do not cling to my image. Do not hold my words as sacred stones. Instead, find me in your practice, in your breath, your silence, your compassion. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you forgive instead of holding on, you continue my teaching." He smiled, eyes glimmering in the candlelight. "The true teacher is not the person before you, it is the awareness within you." That night, Tao asked Lin to walk with him one last time. They went slowly down the path to the cliffs where the ocean met the stars. The moon hung full and bright, its reflection dancing across the calm water. Tao stopped and looked at the horizon. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Lin listened. All she could hear was the endless rhythm of the waves rising, falling, resting, repeating. "That," Tao said softly, "is the sound of forever. Every wave returns to the sea, every life returns to silence." He turned to her and whispered, "When you forget everything I've taught you, remember this one thing. The heart that is open can never truly lose anything." They stood together for a long while, teacher and student, ocean and sky, breath and silence. When they finally returned to the monastery, Tao sat beneath the pine tree and closed his eyes. His breathing slowed, like the tide at the end of the day. And with one final breath, he became as quiet as the night around him. Morning arrived with golden light spreading across the cliffs. The monks gathered around the old pine tree. Lin sat there, tears glistening on her cheeks, but her heart felt strangely peaceful. She looked toward the horizon and whispered, "Thank you, Master." The wind moved softly through the branches as if answering in return. That evening, she led the monks in meditation for the first time. Her voice was calm and steady, carrying the same stillness Tao had once shared. When she finished, she said, "The Master has not gone. He has simply become the silence between our breaths." Years later, people began to call Lin the woman by the sea. Travelers came to learn from her calm presence and simple words. But she always smiled and said, "I have no teachings of my own. I only pour from the cup that was once handed to me." She continued to live in the same small room, tending to the garden, pouring tea for those who came with questions, and reminding them, gently, that the answers were already within. Sometimes she would walk to the cliffs alone at sunset. She'd look at the waves and whisper, "Master, are you here?" And in the sound of the wind, in the scent of salt and pine, she would always feel the same answer, not in words, but in peace. Now, as you listen in this final quiet moment, let your own breath become the sound of the ocean. Inhale the tide rising. Exhale the tide returning. The teachings of Zen remind us that nothing is ever truly lost. Love transforms, wisdom flows onward, and awareness remains. The teacher you seek has always lived within you in your stillness, in your compassion, and in your quiet understanding of what truly matters. Close your eyes now. Let the sound of your breath become your meditation. Let peace fill the space around you, and rest in the gentle truth that you are home. Years passed like gentle waves brushing against the shore. The monastery by the sea grew quieter, its once young monks now older and slower in step. The pine tree where Master Tao had once sat still stood strong, its roots deep, its branches whispering songs of wisdom to the wind. Lin, now gray-haired and serene, had become the monastery's silent heart. She no longer sought to teach with words. Her presence alone was the teaching. When people came to her with questions, she often answered with silence, and in that silence, something within them shifted. The villagers began to say, "She does not speak much, but somehow, when you sit near her, your worries soften." The young traveler. One day, a young traveler arrived at the monastery. He had walked for days, searching for a teacher who could calm his restless mind. His eyes carried the exhaustion of endless seeking, from one teacher to another, from one book to the next. When he found Lin sitting by the sea, he bowed deeply and said, "Master, I've studied many teachings. I've meditated for years, but peace still escapes me. Please, tell me what I must do." Lin looked at him for a long moment, then smiled gently. "Come, sit," she said. They sat together, facing the horizon. The sea stretched endlessly before them, each wave rising and falling like breath itself. After a few minutes of silence, the traveler grew impatient. "Master," he said again, "please tell me the secret. What is the path to peace?" Lin picked up a small stone and dropped it into the water. They watched the ripples spread outward until they disappeared. Then she said softly, "The secret is to stop trying to stop the ripples." The traveler frowned. "I don't understand." Lin smiled again. "You will when you stop trying so hard to understand." The mirror of stillness. The next morning, the traveler woke early and saw Lin sweeping the temple grounds. Her movements were slow and deliberate, as if each sweep of the broom was an act of prayer. He watched in silence for a long time. Then, curious, he asked, "Master, what are you thinking as you sweep?" Lin paused and looked at the ground. "Nothing," she said. "I sweep so the ground becomes clear. You breathe so your mind becomes clear. Peace is not found by thinking about peace. It is found in being fully here." The traveler bowed his head. For the first time in many years, he felt something inside him grow quiet. The lesson of the ocean. That evening, Lin invited the traveler to walk to the cliffs. The sea was calm under the moonlight, its surface glowing like liquid silver. Lin said, "When I was young, I tried to control my thoughts, to push away anger and hold on to peace. But peace cannot be held. It is not an object. It is the space that holds everything else." She picked up a handful of sand and let it fall through her fingers. "Trying to hold peace," she said, "is like trying to hold sand. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips away." The traveler closed his eyes and listened to the waves. He could feel his thoughts rising and falling, just like the water before him. After a while, Lin whispered, "The ocean never complains about the waves. Be like the ocean, vast, still, and accepting. Let the waves of thought come and go. You are not the waves. You are the water itself. The moment of awakening, the traveler stayed for many months. He no longer asked questions. He simply helped with the chores, walked in silence, and watched the seasons change. One morning, while he was fetching water from the well, he suddenly paused. The sound of the wind through the pine trees, the warmth of sunlight on his hands, the feeling of the water running between his fingers, it all merged into a single, living moment. There was no separation between him and the world. No teacher, no student, no path to follow. Just this simple, perfect presence. He smiled. And in that smile, the search ended. The teacher's smile. Later that day, he went to Lin and bowed deeply. "Master," he said softly, "I finally understand what you meant by not stopping the ripples." Lin looked at him kindly. "Ah," she said, "then the ocean within you has become still." The traveler nodded. "But what do I do now?" Lin replied, "Now, go and live. Chop wood, carry water, watch the sunrise, and let your heart stay as open as the sky." He bowed once more, then walked down the long path that led away from the monastery. As he disappeared into the forest, Lin closed her eyes and whispered, "Another wave has returned to the sea." The circle continues. Many years later, another young seeker arrived, and by then Lin had grown too old to move easily. But her eyes still sparkled like morning dew. When the young one bowed before her and said, "Master, will you teach me?" She smiled and pointed toward the ocean. "There," she said, "listen." The student listened. At first, all they heard was the endless roar of the waves. But then, as minutes passed, the sound became something else, a rhythm that matched their own heartbeat. And suddenly there was no teacher, no student, no question left to ask. Only the vast sound of being. The ocean within you. As you listen now, imagine that ocean endless, vast, and calm. Each wave a thought, each ripple a feeling, each breath a tide coming in and out. You don't need to still the water. You only need to see that, beneath every wave, the ocean remains whole and unbroken. When the mind quiets, you realize that peace was never missing. You were simply looking in the wrong direction. You were the ocean all along. So now, breathe softly. Let your body rest. Let your heart open like the horizon at dawn. And know this, nothing is outside you. The teacher, the lesson, and the peace you seek have always lived within. The years drifted by like mist over the sea. The monastery remained, weathered yet serene, its wooden beams soaked with the fragrance of incense and salt air. Time, with its gentle touch, had softened everything, the stones, the trees, even the hearts of those who lived there. Lin, the old woman by the sea, no longer walked to the cliffs each morning. Her body had grown fragile, her breath slow and tender. But her eyes still carried the stillness of oceans. Those who came to visit her no longer sought words, for they knew the silence around her spoke louder than any teaching. Every dawn, the soft light of the rising sun would spill through Lin's small window. She would wake slowly, her breath steady and calm. Beside her bed sat a single cup of tea, its steam rising like prayer smoke into the cool morning air. Sometimes she would whisper softly to herself, "Another wave has reached the shore." She no longer thought of life and death as opposites. To her, they were simply two sides of the same ocean, the tide coming in and the tide going out. And so, each day she sat in silence, watching the light shift across her room, listening to the wind move through the old pine tree outside. Her students often came and sat nearby, not to ask questions, but to learn how to listen. For when you sat with Lin, you could feel that even silence had a sound, soft, vast, and alive. One evening, the sky glowed like gold. Clouds drifted lazily, and the waves below shimmered in the fading light. Lin sat by her window, gazing out at the endless horizon. A young monk entered quietly and knelt beside her. "Master," he whispered, "the sun is setting. Would you like me to light a lamp?" Lin smiled faintly. "No need," she said softly. "The sun and I are setting together." The monk bowed his head, tears forming in his eyes. "Will you leave us soon?" he asked. Lin looked at him with infinite gentleness. "Leave?" she repeated. "How can I leave what I have never departed from? The wave returns to the ocean, but it was always water." Her voice grew softer. "Do not cling to this form. Forms change, but what you truly are cannot die." Outside, the wind stirred the pine needles into a soft song, as if nature itself were breathing with her. That night, the monks gathered outside her room. No one spoke. Only the sound of the sea echoed in the distance, a rhythmic, eternal breath. Inside, Lin sat cross-legged, eyes half closed, a gentle smile resting on her face. She whispered to herself, "The sound of silence is the sound of the heart returning home." Her breath slowed, and in the stillness between two heartbeats, she became one with the silence she had always taught. The monks felt it not as an ending, but as a wave dissolving into the sea. At dawn, the pine tree outside her window swayed gently in the wind. The air was filled with the scent of salt and morning dew. When the monks entered her room, they found her sitting peacefully, as if simply resting. On the table beside her cup of tea, there was a small note written in her familiar, graceful hand. It read, "There is no birth, there is no death, only the sound of the ocean breathing." They bowed deeply. No one wept. Instead, they opened the windows wide and let the morning light fill the room. Years passed, and the story of Lin and Dao became a quiet legend told by the sea. Travelers still came, drawn not by fame, but by the unexplainable peace that lingered in that place. Many said that when the wind blew through the pines, they could hear a whisper, a soft voice saying, "Be still and listen." Others claimed that on certain calm nights, the sea itself would hum, as if singing a lullaby older than time. No one could say for sure, but everyone who came left a little lighter, a little more awake, a little more at peace. Even now, as you listen, Lin's teaching continues not through words, but through presence. It is there in your breath, in the space between one thought and the next, in the quiet moments when you stop reaching and simply allow yourself to be. The sound of silence isn't empty, it's full of life, full of awareness, full of everything that truly matters. It's the same silence that existed before you were born, and the same silence that will remain after you are gone. It's what you've always been searching for, and it has been here all along, patiently waiting for you to notice. Now take a deep breath. Let your body soften. Let your thoughts drift like clouds through a vast, open sky. You are not the clouds, you are the sky. You are not the wave, you are the ocean. You are not the sound, you are the silence that holds it. Rest here, in this simple awareness, in this eternal now. There is nowhere to go, nothing to fix, nothing to become. Only this, the quiet hum of being, the pulse of existence, the peace that whispers beneath every heartbeat. When the Buddha was asked what enlightenment was, he smiled and said, "It is the sound of one hand clapping." Lin might have said, "It is the sound of silence." Both mean the same. When you stop searching, you begin to hear. When you stop grasping, you begin to see. In the end, there is no path because you are already home. So now, as the story fades into stillness, close your eyes and listen not with your ears, but with your heart. The sound you hear beneath all sounds, the silence that holds every breath, that is the sound of your true self. And it whispers gently, "You are peace. You are love. You are the sound of silence." The sea was calm that evening. The sky stretched wide and open, painted in soft colors of fading gold and quiet blue. Somewhere far off, the wind moved gently across the water, and each wave touched the shore as if whispering, "Come home." You begin to walk along the coast, your footsteps light on the cool sand. The sound of the waves follows you steady, rhythmic, comforting. Each step feels softer than the last. Each breath feels deeper, slower, freer. The sun has already set, but the horizon still glows faintly like a memory that doesn't want to leave just yet. You keep walking, and after a while you see something ahead, a faint light, glowing in the distance. As you move closer, you notice a narrow path leading from the beach into a quiet forest. The air smells of pine and salt, and the sound of the ocean fades into a soft hum behind you. You follow the path. It winds gently upward, past tall trees and smooth stones shining under the moonlight. The forest is peaceful. No noise, no rush, just stillness. In the distance, you hear a soft bell. It rings once, then fades, leaving behind a silence that feels full and alive. You keep walking, guided only by that silence and the faint light that grows brighter ahead. Soon the trees open up, and before you stands a small, ancient temple. Its wooden doors are open, and inside a single lantern glows. The temple seems familiar, as if you have been here before, perhaps in a dream, perhaps in another life. You step inside quietly. The air is warm and still. The walls are simple, no decorations, no statues. Only the smell of sandalwood and the gentle flicker of the lantern flame. In the center of the room lies a small stone bowl filled with clear water. The light from the lantern dances upon its surface, and you see a reflection soft, calm, peaceful. For a moment, you simply stand there breathing, and as you do, the stillness around you begins to move through you softly, like water entering dry earth. It feels as though the entire temple is breathing with you. Each inhale draws in the peace of the world. Each exhale releases the weight of every worry you've ever carried. As you stand there, you begin to feel a quiet presence nearby. You don't see anyone, but you feel it gentle, steady, familiar. A soft voice seems to rise within you, not from the air, but from somewhere deeper. It is calm and warm, like a whisper from your own heart. It says, "You have come far, but you were never far from home. The light you see here has always lived within you. The peace you seek has always been your nature." You close your eyes and listen. The voice continues. Tao taught that the mind is the sky. Lin taught that the heart is the ocean. And now you are both sky and sea, vast and still, free and awake. The air grows brighter, though the lantern hasn't changed. The light seems to come from everywhere, from the walls, the floor, even from within your chest. You take another slow breath. With each inhale, the light grows stronger. It spreads through your arms, your legs, your heart. Every cell of your being glows with quiet warmth. And then something beautiful happens. You realize that the temple is no longer around you. You are the temple. The walls are your breath. The light is your awareness. The silence is your true self, eternal, peaceful, and whole. The voice returns once more, but this time it is completely your own. It says, "There is no need to search anymore. There is no need to ask what peace is. You are the peace that life has been trying to show you." You feel tears forming not from sadness, but from recognition. You have finally remembered what you always knew, that nothing was missing and nothing was ever separate. Slowly, the light begins to fade back into gentle moonlight. You find yourself once again in the temple, the stone bowl before you, the lantern flickering softly. Outside, you can hear the ocean again, its steady rhythm echoing through the open doors. You walk to the doorway and stand beneath the night sky. The stars shimmer quietly above, each one glowing like a reflection of the same light within you. The sea glimmers below, and you smile, remembering Lin's final words. The sound of silence is the sound of the heart returning home. Now you take a slow breath. You feel calm, grounded, and whole. The wind brushes softly across your skin, and you realize it feels just like a kind hand. You whisper quietly to yourself, "I am here, I am home." And in that moment, you understand the temple is not a place on earth. It is a space within your heart, always open, always waiting, always filled with light. You turn to leave, but as you step away, you notice something beautiful wherever your feet touch the ground. Tiny sparks of golden light appear, like stars blooming in the dark. They fade gently behind you, just as dawn begins to rise over the horizon. The first light of morning touches the sea, turning it into a mirror of soft gold. The waves roll gently, their rhythm as peaceful as your breath. You stand there quietly, watching the sky grow brighter, feeling the warmth of the sun on your face. Somewhere deep inside, you know that Tao and Lin are here not as figures of the past, but as the silence, the breath, the peace that now lives within you. You bow your head to the horizon and whisper, "Thank you." And the sea answers, not in words, but in sound, the sound of the world simply being. As you listen to that sound, you realize something profound. The temple never truly ends. Every breath you take, every act of kindness, every moment of awareness. These are its walls, its light, its song. The teachings of Zen were never about becoming someone new. They were about remembering who you have always been. So now breathe softly. Let go of every effort. Let go of every name and every story. Just rest in this, the quiet, endless presence that has no beginning and no end. This is peace. This is home. This is the temple of light, and it lives within you forever. That night, as Tao sat quietly in his small wooden room, a gentle rain began to fall. At first he didn't notice it. His mind was still turning over the words of Master Genzo, replaying the story about the ocean and the waves. But slowly the rhythmic sound of the rain began to draw his attention away from thought. The drops tapped softly against the roof, then rolled down the windows, merging into tiny streams. The sound wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, patient, alive. For a long while, Tao just listened, and in that listening, something within him began to open. He realized that for most of his life, he had been trying to fix his mind, to polish it, control it, discipline it into stillness. But the rain outside didn't try to be anything other than what it was. It fell, moment by moment, without hesitation, without resistance. Could his mind be the same? He closed his eyes and breathed in the cool night air. Each breath entered gently, like a wave touching the shore, and left just as softly. The sound of rain became a kind of teacher, showing him the way of effortless being. For a few minutes, his thoughts slowed. He didn't force them to stop. They just seemed less important. What mattered was this sound, this breath, this moment. And in that simple moment, something shifted inside him. The rain was no longer outside. It was part of him. The falling water, the cool air, the gentle pulse of life. It was all moving together, flowing without boundaries. Tao smiled faintly. He realized now that stillness wasn't the absence of movement. It was the peace that allowed movement to exist. The mind didn't need to be silent to be at peace. Peace was already there, underneath everything, like the sky beneath the weather. Later, when the rain stopped, Tao stepped outside. The ground smelled fresh, alive. Raindrops clung to leaves, glimmering in the faint light of the moon. The air was quiet now, but the silence was full. It hummed with life. He thought of what Master Genzo had said earlier. The ocean does not fight the waves, Tao. It embraces them. Maybe his mind was not his enemy after all. Maybe his thoughts were not intrusions, but part of the vast ocean of his being. He bowed to the night sky and whispered softly, "Thank you for the rain." And in that whisper, there was no trace of struggle, only acceptance. That night, as Tao drifted into sleep, his dreams were calm and light. He dreamt of clouds moving gently across an endless sky, of rivers flowing effortlessly toward the sea, of moments unfolding one after another, without resistance, without effort, simply being what they were. For the first time in many years, he slept deeply. Not because his mind was silent, but because he had stopped fighting with it. When he awoke at dawn, the monastery bell was ringing in the distance. The sound was soft yet clear, cutting through the cool air like a song of awakening. Tao smiled. The world felt new again, even though nothing had changed. The rain had washed away not the world, but his resistance to it. And in that quiet morning light, he finally understood. Peace was never something to be found. It was something to remember. The next morning, the world outside seemed freshly born. The rain had stopped, but its memory lingered in every drop that clung to the leaves and in the soft fragrance rising from the earth. The monastery grounds glistened in the pale morning light. Birds began to sing in the distance, their voices blending with the faint hum of life returning after the night's cleansing rain. Dao walked slowly toward the main courtyard, where the other monks were beginning their morning tasks. Some swept the stone pathways, others carried buckets of water to tend the small garden, and a few were already sitting in meditation beneath the old pine trees. For the first time in a long while, Dao didn't rush to begin his chores. He paused near the edge of the courtyard, watching the others move. Every motion, lifting a bucket, sweeping a leaf, bowing in silence, seemed peaceful, almost like a dance. He realized that all of these simple actions were expressions of the same stillness he had felt the night before. Master Genzo appeared from the meditation hall, his robe swaying gently in the morning breeze. His face carried its usual calmness, but there was a warmth in his eyes as he saw Dao standing there. "Good morning, Dao," he said softly. "Good morning, Master," Dao replied with a bow. They stood in silence for a few breaths, the air filled with the scent of wet earth and pine. Then Genzo asked, "Tell me, what did you learn from the rain?" Dao smiled faintly. "It showed me that peace doesn't mean the end of movement," he said. "It means not fighting what moves. The rain falls, the waves rise, the thoughts come and go. The sky remains." Genzo nodded slowly. "Yes, and now the next step," he said, "to see that the peace you discovered during the rain is not just for quiet moments. It must walk with you while you sweep, while you cook, while you speak to others. Zen is not only found in silence, it is found in every movement, every breath, every act done with awareness." Dao listened carefully. His mind was still and receptive. "Peace," the master continued, "is not something you carry like a fragile object. It carries you. The moment you remember to stop clinging, peace is there again. The key is not to make effort to be peaceful, but to live as if peace is your natural state, because it is." The words sank deep into Dao's heart. He felt their truth not just as ideas, but as something living within him. That day, Dao went about his work differently. When he swept the floor, he didn't rush to finish it. Each stroke of the broom became a meditation, sound, movement, stillness, breath, all flowing together. When he served food in the kitchen, he noticed how the steam rose from the bowls, curling into the air like a silent offering. When he spoke to the other monks, he listened fully, without trying to think ahead or control the conversation. At first, his old habits tried to return. Thoughts whispered, "You're wasting time. You're not focused enough." But each time he simply noticed them, smiled, and let them pass. He didn't resist, and so, slowly, they lost their power. In the evenings when meditation time came, Dao sat quietly on his cushion. He no longer tried to force his mind into stillness. Instead, he allowed it to be just as it was, sometimes restless, sometimes calm, sometimes clear, sometimes cloudy. Whatever it was, he accepted it. He remembered Master Genzo's words, "Let your awareness be the sky and let thoughts be the clouds." As the days passed, something inside Dao began to change. The same tasks he had done for years, sweeping, cleaning, chanting, now felt completely different. They were no longer chores to complete, but opportunities to be. He began to see that Zen was not confined to meditation halls or sacred scrolls. Zen was in the sound of footsteps on stone, the flicker of a candle flame, the taste of simple rice after a long day. One evening, as he poured tea for Master Genzo, Dao said softly, "Master, I think I finally understand. The peace I was looking for was never outside my ordinary life. It was hidden in every small act, waiting to be seen." Genzo smiled gently. "Then you have begun to wake up," he said. "Remember, Dao, enlightenment is not a single moment of light. It is the gradual dawning of awareness in everything you do. Each breath, each step, each word, these are all gates to awakening." That night, Dao returned to his small room and sat by the window. The moonlight shone through the damp air, casting silver patterns on the floor. He watched quietly as a small breeze stirred the branches outside. For a long while, he simply breathed. Nothing to reach for, nothing to fix, nothing to change. Just this moment, complete, whole, enough. He realized that peace was not something to be achieved at the end of a long spiritual journey. It was the journey itself, the gentle unfolding of awareness through each passing breath. The next morning, as the bell rang and the monks gathered for their morning prayers, Tao bowed deeply. The world, he thought, had never been the problem. It was his resistance to it that had kept him blind. Now, with a heart at ease and a mind open like the sky, he whispered to himself, "I am home." The following day, the monastery was quiet except for the soft sound of sandals on stone and the distant rustle of trees in the courtyard. Morning meditation had ended, and the monks were dispersing to their daily duties. But Master Genzo called out gently, "Tao, come with me." Tao bowed and followed the old teacher through the long wooden hallway that led to the tea room. The air smelled faintly of pine and incense, and light streamed through the paper windows in thin, golden lines. In the center of the room was a low table set with 2 cups, a small clay teapot, and a steaming kettle. Master Genzo motioned for Tao to sit. "Today," he said softly, "we will have tea." Tao smiled, thinking this would be another quiet lesson in mindfulness. He folded his legs beneath him and sat with his back straight, hands resting gently in his lap. The master began to pour the tea. The fragrant steam rose in delicate swirls. Tao watched carefully as Genzo filled his cup, but the master didn't stop when the cup was full. He kept pouring. The hot tea spilled over the rim, flowing across the table and onto the floor. Startled, Tao exclaimed, "Master, the cup is already full. No more will go in." Genzo set the teapot down and looked at him with kind eyes. "Exactly," he said quietly. "You are like this cup, Tao, so full of your own ideas, opinions, and judgments that nothing new can enter. To taste the true tea of wisdom, you must first empty your cup." The words landed gently, yet deeply. Tao felt his heart grow still. He realized that even as he had been practicing mindfulness, a subtle pride had crept in. He had begun to believe he knew what Zen was. He had been comparing his calmness to others, quietly thinking himself improved. Now he saw how that belief had once again filled his cup. Master Genzo smiled and refilled the pot, this time stopping just before the cup's brim. "True learning," he said, "is not adding more knowledge. It is seeing through what you think you already know. The mind must become empty like this cup, open, spacious, ready to receive." Tao listened in silence. The master continued, "An empty cup can hold tea, a quiet mind can hold truth, but when the cup is full of expectations, even the sweetest tea will overflow and be wasted." They sat together without words for a long moment. The scent of the tea mingled with the faint sound of wind outside. Then Master Genzo poured tea into Tao's cup again, this time carefully, with full attention. "Drink," he said. Tao lifted the cup slowly, feeling the warmth against his palms. He took a small sip. The flavor was deep and rich, simple yet complete. It wasn't just tea, it was the present moment itself. The master spoke again. "To live with an empty cup is not to be ignorant. It means you are always available for life as it is. You do not cling to what you think you know. You meet each moment freshly, like a child seeing the world for the first time." Tao nodded. "So to empty the cup is to let go of the idea that I have arrived." "Yes," Genzo said. "Zen is not about reaching a destination. It is about realizing there was never anywhere to go. Each time you think you understand completely, empty again. Each time you think you are done learning, bow again. In that humility lies true peace." Tao lowered his gaze, feeling gratitude rise within him. The lesson was simple, yet its truth felt infinite. They finished their tea in silence. The master gathered the cups and said, "The tea ceremony is not about the tea. It is a mirror of your mind. When your mind is full of noise, the act becomes mechanical. But when your mind is empty, each movement, pouring, sipping, breathing, becomes sacred." That evening, Tao walked through the monastery gardens alone. The air was cool, the sky painted with shades of amber and violet. He watched a small bird perch on a branch, then take flight. For the first time, he felt no need to name or explain it. The bird was enough as it was, no meaning to add, no lesson to extract. He thought of his own mind, once overflowing with searching, comparing, and striving. It had been like that full cup of tea, unable to hold anything new now. As he walked, he felt light, almost transparent, as if life could flow through him without obstruction. A few drops of rain began to fall, soft and cleansing. He didn't seek shelter. He simply tilted his face upward, letting the coolness touch his skin. In that gentle rain, Tao understood what Master Genzo truly meant. To live with an empty cup was not to abandon thought. It was to stop clinging to it, to meet life not with conclusions, but with openness. He smiled, whispering to himself, "I will stay empty so that I can keep being filled." The rain continued for a while, and the sound mingled with the faint chime of the monastery bell. Each drop, each note, each breath felt like a teaching, quiet, wordless, complete. And as the evening deepened, Tao felt the same truth echo again in his heart. Peace is not found in holding tightly, but in letting go. The next morning, mist wrapped the monastery in a soft, silver veil. The air was cool and still, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. As the bell echoed through the courtyard, the monks gathered for their morning meditation, moving quietly like drifting clouds. Tao took his seat among them, his posture straight, his breath steady. The lessons of the past days lingered within him. The sky-like mind, the peace of acceptance, the humility of an empty cup. Yet as he sat, he noticed something subtle, a thought rising in the background. "I am doing well," it whispered. "I am becoming peaceful." He caught the thought, saw it, and smiled gently. There it was again. Pride, the quiet shadow of progress. He didn't try to push it away this time. He simply watched it, like a reflection rippling across still water. After meditation, Master Genzo invited Tao to walk with him down to the pond that lay beyond the monastery gates. The path was lined with tall bamboo, their leaves whispering softly in the morning breeze. The pond was clear and calm, mirroring the pale sky above. The two of them stood there for a while in silence, gazing at their reflections in the water. Then Genzo spoke. "Tao," he said, "tell me, what do you see?" Tao looked down. "I see myself," he replied, "and I see you beside me." The master smiled faintly. "And when the wind moves across the surface?" Tao watched as a soft gust stirred the pond, breaking their reflections into ripples. "Then everything becomes distorted," he said. "The image disappears." Genzo nodded. "Yes, the pond is like the mind. When it is still, it reflects the world as it is, clear and true. But when it is disturbed, what it shows becomes distorted. The world hasn't changed, only the reflection has." Tao felt the truth of it immediately. His mind, he realized, was often that pond, disturbed by waves of anger, fear, pride, or desire. The world outside was not the problem, it was his reaction to it that clouded the water. Genzo continued, "A mirror does not cling to what it reflects. It does not hold the past image or anticipate the next. It simply shows what is before it. This is the way of the awakened mind, the mirror mind." Tao listened intently, his gaze still fixed on the trembling reflection before him. "To live with a mirror mind," the master said, "is to meet each moment without judgment, without attachment. If someone praises you, reflect it and let it go. If someone criticizes you, reflect it and let it go. When you are happy, reflect it. When you are sad, reflect that too. The mirror does not choose what to show, it simply shows." Tao looked up, his eyes softening. "But master," he said, "isn't that cold? To just reflect everything and feel nothing?" Genzo chuckled softly. "Ah, that is where many misunderstand. The mirror mind does not mean indifference, it means clarity. When you stop clinging, true compassion can appear. You can love more deeply because you are no longer tangled in your own reflection." They sat by the pond's edge for a long time. The ripples slowly calmed and the surface grew smooth again. The reflection of the sky reappeared, vast and serene. Genzo pointed at the water. See, Dao, the pond does not chase away the ripples, nor does it demand stillness. It simply allows them to pass. When the wind settles, the reflection returns by itself. Something in those words touched a deep part of Dao's being. He understood now that all his attempts to fix his mind had been like trying to smooth the pond's surface with his hands. It only created more waves. He bowed his head slightly. So, Master, he said quietly, I should not fight my emotions or thoughts, but allow them to come and go. Genzo smiled. Exactly. Let them come. Let them go. Be the mirror that reflects everything but holds nothing. That is true freedom. They sat until the sun climbed higher, scattering light across the water like broken glass. The wind stirred again, and the reflections danced, but Dao no longer wished for stillness. He simply watched, breathing in harmony with each movement. When they rose to return to the monastery, Dao felt lighter. As they walked through the bamboo grove, he noticed how the sunlight flickered through the swaying leaves, forming endless, shifting patterns on the ground. He thought, this too is the mirror mind. The world moves, yet awareness remains steady. Later that day, as he worked in the garden, another monk accidentally spilled a bucket of water, splashing mud onto Dao's robe. The younger monk apologized frantically, bowing again and again. Dao smiled and shook his head. It's only water, he said kindly. It will dry. As he walked away, he realized something important. Before, such an incident might have irritated him. He might have felt disrespected or distracted, but now his mind was calm, like the pond after the wind. The event had happened, been reflected, and passed. No trace remained. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Dao returned to the pond once more. The surface glowed with golden light. He saw his reflection there, clear, calm, peaceful, and for the first time he didn't think, I am calm or I am peaceful. He simply was. He whispered to himself, the pond doesn't try to be clear. It just stops being disturbed. The air grew still around him, as if the entire world had paused to listen. And in that stillness, Dao realized that the mind was never truly clouded. It only forgot its own depth. He bowed to his reflection, to the sky, and to the silent pond, saying softly, thank you for showing me myself. Several weeks passed, and the rhythm of life in the monastery continued as gently as the tides. Morning bells, silent meals, the hush of meditation, the murmur of chanting, all flowing seamlessly, like a song without beginning or end. Dao had changed, not in a way one could see from the outside, but within, the currents of struggle had softened. He no longer waged wars with his thoughts, nor did he chase after perfect stillness. He had begun to see peace not as a state to reach, but as a way to be. One evening, Master Genzo called for him again. The two met beneath an old plum tree that had stood beside the temple for generations. Its branches stretched gracefully toward the fading sky, dotted with white blossoms that glowed faintly in the dusk. Genzo stood quietly for a while, gazing at the petals as they drifted to the ground one by one. Finally, he said, Dao, tell me what you see. Dao looked up at the branches. I see beauty, he said softly, and sadness. The flowers are falling. The master smiled gently. Yes, both are true. The beauty and the sadness are one thing. Do you know why this tree is such a great teacher? Dao shook his head. Because it never clings, said Genzo. When the time comes, the blossoms fall. The tree does not try to hold them. And because it lets go so completely, it is ready for new blossoms when spring returns. They watched as the wind passed through the branches, sending another shower of petals into the air. Some landed softly on the ground, others floated into the pond nearby. The sight was both tender and fleeting, a silent reminder of how everything changes. Dao, Genzo said after a long pause, the greatest suffering comes not from pain itself, but from our refusal to let go. We cling to moments, to people, to identities, even to peace itself. But all things are visitors. They come and they go. To resist this is to fight the very flow of life. Tao lowered his gaze. He thought of the times he had clung tightly, to his frustrations, to his need for progress, to his ideas of perfection. Even his attachment to peace, he realized, had been another form of grasping. "How do I let go completely, Master?" he asked quietly. "It feels easy to say, but hard to live." Genzo picked up a fallen petal from the ground and placed it in Dao's palm. "You do not need to make yourself let go," he said. "You only need to see that holding on is what hurts. The hand opens naturally when it grows tired of clutching." He continued, "Letting go is not a single act. It is a way of living. Each breath teaches it. You inhale, you receive. You exhale, you release. Life is built on this rhythm. To let go is to trust that what leaves will make space for what must come." Dao closed his hand around the petal, feeling its fragility. It was soft, light, and already beginning to curl. He opened his hand again and watched as a small breeze carried it away. In that moment, something deep inside him loosened. They stood together in silence as the sky darkened, the first stars appearing between the drifting clouds. The air was cool and the scent of plum blossoms filled the evening. After some time, Genzo spoke again. "There is a story from an old Zen master," he said. "A student once came to him, grieving deeply after the death of his teacher. The master listened quietly, then said, 'Do you see this candle?' The student nodded. The master blew out the flame and said, 'The light has gone, but the warmth remains. You cannot hold the flame, but you can live by its warmth.' Dao's eyes softened. 'So even loss can teach us to love more gently,' he said. "Yes," Genzo replied. "When you stop clinging, love becomes pure. It doesn't demand or possess. It simply shines, like the sun that gives its warmth to everything without asking for anything in return." They began walking back toward the monastery. The gravel crunched softly beneath their feet. Along the way, they passed the small stone statues of old monks that lined the path, each one smiling serenely, despite the moss and weather that had worn their faces smooth over the years. Dao looked at them and thought, they too are letting go, slowly, with grace, with time. When they reached the temple steps, Genzo stopped. "Remember, Dao," he said, "everything changes. The petals fall, the clouds drift. Even this body will one day return to dust. But awareness, the space in which all things come and go, remains. Letting go does not mean losing. It means resting in what cannot be lost." That night, Dao sat by his window again. The moon hung low in the sky, its reflection shimmering on the pond below. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying the faint scent of flowers. He breathed in deeply, then out again, watching the petals float past in the moonlight. He realized then that letting go was not an act of loss. It was an act of love. To release the moment was to allow it to exist fully, without trying to cage it in memory or fear. Each passing instant was complete, perfect, and free. And as he sat there, breathing with the rhythm of the night, he whispered softly into the still air, "Thank you for teaching me how to release." The moon, silent and whole, shone down upon him as if to say, "You have never lost anything real." The night had grown deep now, and the air was perfectly still. The candles in the monastery flickered softly, casting long shadows on the walls. Dao sat alone in the meditation hall. The sound of the ocean waves, though distant, could still be heard like a slow heartbeat in the background. Steady, calm, eternal. He had been sitting there for hours, but tonight something was different. For the first time, he wasn't trying to meditate. He wasn't forcing himself to breathe in a particular way or trying to stop his thoughts. He simply sat just as the teacher had said, doing nothing, expecting nothing. And in that stillness, something subtle began to happen. A thought arose. Am I doing this right? Then another. Maybe I should focus more. But this time, Dao didn't chase them. He just watched them come and then quietly drift away, like bubbles rising to the surface of a pond and bursting. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time no longer felt like it mattered. The silence began to deepen. Not the silence of sound, but a silence that lived beneath sound. A silence that was alive, breathing, vast. It was not empty. It was full. And for the first time, Tao felt that this silence wasn't something he had to create. It had been there all along, beneath every moment of noise, beneath every worry, beneath every restless thought. He understood now what Master Genzo meant when he said, "The mind is like the sky. No matter how many storms pass through, the sky never disappears. The awareness that watches, that sees, that is, it remains untouched." Tao smiled faintly. He felt a lightness in his chest, as though a great burden had been quietly lifted. The need to fix himself, the constant effort to be peaceful, the endless chase for enlightenment, all of it dissolved into that vast silence. He noticed his breath, soft, steady, effortless. He noticed the cool air on his skin. He noticed the rise and fall of his chest, and he noticed the stillness between each breath, the space that was neither in nor out, just pure being. In that moment, Tao realized something beautiful. He had been searching for peace as though it were a treasure hidden far away. But peace was never lost. It was simply overlooked, buried beneath layers of striving, judgment, and resistance. As the candles burned lower, Tao bowed his head gently. Not as a ritual, but as a natural response, a gesture of gratitude toward everything. The teacher, the sky, the ocean, the restless thoughts, even the long years of struggle that had brought him here. Because now he could see every moment of frustration, every storm in his mind had been guiding him to this understanding. The waves were never against the ocean. They were the ocean expressing itself. And so it was with him. As he rose and walked out into the moonlight, the wind touched his face softly, as if greeting an old friend. The world hadn't changed. The waves still crashed against the cliffs. The night still carried the sound of cicadas and rustling leaves. But his way of seeing had changed completely. The world was no longer something to fix or overcome. It was something to be gently seen and accepted, just as it is. As Tao stood overlooking the sea once more, he whispered quietly, "Nothing was ever missing. I just forgot how to see." The moon shone above him, calm and bright, its reflection rippling gently on the water's surface. And for the first time in his life, Tao felt completely, utterly at home. The morning after Tao's silent awakening, the sun rose gently over the sea. The first rays of light touched the waves, and the mist began to fade, revealing the cliffs and the quiet monastery perched above. Birds sang from the trees, and a breeze carried the scent of salt and pine. Tao sat outside his small wooden hut, sipping a bowl of warm tea. Everything around him looked the same as it always had, the same path of stones, the same old gate, the same sound of monks sweeping the courtyard. Yet everything felt profoundly new. Each sound, each movement, each breath all seemed to shimmer with quiet meaning. The world was not just something he was in, it was part of him. Every sight, every sound felt like a reflection of the same still awareness he had touched the night before. He watched one of the younger monks, Sora, sweeping fallen leaves. The boy looked tired and impatient. He sighed heavily as the wind carried more leaves onto the clean path. For a moment, Tao saw himself in the boy years ago, frustrated, restless, always trying to make life stay still. He walked over slowly and said gently, "You look troubled, Sora." The young monk frowned. "I clean this path every morning, but the wind keeps undoing it. I wish it would stop." Tao smiled softly. "The wind isn't your enemy. It's simply doing what wind does." Sora looked confused. "Then what am I supposed to do?" Tao took the broom from his hands and began to sweep slowly. "You sweep," he said, "not to finish, but simply to sweep." The boy watched as Tao's movements became almost like a dance, slow, natural, unhurried. Each stroke of the broom was peaceful, effortless, almost joyful. When the wind blew again and more leaves scattered across the ground, Tao simply smiled and kept sweeping. "This," he said, "is Zen in motion." Sora tilted his head. "But I don't feel peaceful when I do it." "That's okay," Tao said, handing him the broom. Peace doesn't always mean feeling peaceful. It means not fighting what's happening. The leaves fall, the wind blows, the broom moves, and all of it is just life, unfolding. For a long while, they swept together in silence. Later that day, Tao went to visit Master Genzo. The teacher was tending a small garden behind the temple, trimming the edges of a bonsai tree. The old monk looked up and smiled as Tao approached. "Ah," Genzo said, "you look lighter today." Tao bowed deeply. "Something changed last night, Master. I stopped searching. I stopped trying to silence my thoughts. And in that stillness, I felt peace. It was so simple, and yet it felt infinite." Genzo nodded, eyes warm with understanding. "Yes," he said, "peace was never hiding from you. You were only looking in the wrong direction." They sat together for a while, watching the small waves of the ocean in the distance. The sound of temple bells echoed faintly through the air. "Master," Tao said after a while, "if this peace is always here, why do so many people never see it?" Genzo smiled gently. "Because they keep searching for it as something separate. They believe peace will come when the world behaves. But true peace is discovered when we stop demanding that it does." He picked up a fallen leaf and turned it over in his hands. "Even this leaf," he said, "is exactly as it should be, falling, decaying, returning to the earth. When you can see beauty in that, you are free." Tao nodded slowly. "And what do I do with this peace now, Master?" Genzo looked at him kindly. "You live it. You let it flow into your every action, your walking, your speaking, your work. Let peace be in your hands when you help someone. Let it be in your eyes when you listen. Zen isn't about escaping the world. It's about bringing awareness into it." Tao reflected on this. He realized that enlightenment wasn't a single moment or a grand achievement. It was a way of being a quiet seeing, a soft heart, a gentle step. The next morning, Tao joined the other monks for their daily tasks. He helped in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, stirring soup, washing bowls. Every small action became a meditation. The scent of rice, the warmth of steam, the rhythm of breathing, everything was alive, sacred, complete. No moment felt ordinary anymore. In the days that followed, Tao noticed something remarkable. The more he relaxed into awareness, the kinder he became. He found himself smiling more often, listening more deeply, and speaking less. When someone made a mistake, he no longer rushed to correct them. He simply observed, understood, and helped if needed. He discovered that compassion wasn't something to be practiced. It was something that naturally grew from stillness. When the heart is no longer clouded by judgment or fear, kindness flows without effort, like water running downhill. One evening, as the sun painted the sea in golden light, Tao sat quietly beside Master Genzo. Neither spoke for a long time. The waves rolled in and out, and the world seemed to breathe in harmony with them. Finally, Tao said, "Master, the ocean no longer feels like something outside me. It feels as though I am part of its rhythm." Genzo looked at him with soft eyes. "That's because you are," he said. "There was never a separation, only the illusion of one." The teacher placed a hand on Tao's shoulder and whispered, "When you understand that the same awareness lives in all beings, the bird, the wave, the stranger, the monk, compassion becomes effortless. You see yourself everywhere." As the last light faded, Tao felt that truth settle gently in his heart. He understood now that the purpose of Zen was not to escape life, but to love it fully, to see the sacred in the simple, to find stillness in motion. He bowed deeply to his teacher, and the sea breeze carried the sound of their shared silence, a silence vast enough to hold all things. Weeks passed peacefully at the seaside monastery. The days followed a quiet rhythm meditation before dawn, simple meals, mindful work, and long walks by the ocean. The monks moved like flowing water, each step measured, each breath intentional. Tao had settled into this calm life. He no longer chased thoughts, no longer fought himself. Every sound of the world had become a friend, the cry of the gulls, the creak of the old temple doors, the laughter of the younger monks. Everything was gentle now. Everything had its place. One afternoon, as Tao swept the temple steps, he noticed someone approaching from the winding coastal path, a traveler dressed in dust-covered clothes, with a heavy bag over his shoulder. His face looked tired, his eyes restless, and his breath was uneven from the long climb. When he reached the gate, he bowed deeply and asked, "Is this the monastery of Master Genzo?" Tao nodded. "Yes, traveler, you have come to the right place." The man looked around with a kind of anxious wonder. "They say your master teaches the way of peace. I have searched far for it." Tao smiled softly. "You are welcome here. Please, come in." They sat together by the steps, drinking cool water from a clay pot. After a long silence, the traveler spoke again, his voice trembling slightly. "My life is filled with noise," he said. "I run a business in the city. People shout, markets roar, and every day I feel I'm drowning in demands. Even when I'm alone, my mind won't stop. It's always planning, worrying, remembering. I came here hoping your master can teach me how to quiet it." Tao looked at him with understanding. "I know that noise," he said. "I lived in it once, not in the city, but in my own mind." The traveler's eyes softened. "And you found peace here?" Tao nodded. "Yes, but not because this place is quiet. Peace isn't born from silence outside. It grows from silence within." The traveler frowned. "But how can I find silence when my world never stops shouting?" Tao placed his broom aside and said, "Let me tell you a story." He began slowly, like the turning of a page. Once there was a musician who loved his instrument more than anything. He practiced for years, but every time he played in the market, the noise of the crowd made him angry. He would say, "How can I perform when no one listens?" One day he met an old monk who told him, "The sound you make does not compete with the noise that joins it. The world is your orchestra. When you play without resistance, even the chaos becomes music." Tao smiled. So the musician went back to the market. He played while the crowd shouted, while the sellers argued, while children laughed. And for the first time, he heard harmony in the noise. Nothing had changed around him, only within him. The traveler listened intently, his eyes thoughtful. "You mean I must change how I hear the world?" Tao nodded. "Exactly. When you stop trying to silence life, you discover a deeper stillness that doesn't depend on quiet. True peace doesn't hide from sound, it holds it." The traveler lowered his gaze. "I don't know if I can do that. My thoughts never stop." Tao smiled kindly. "Thoughts are like the ocean's waves. You don't stop them, you learn to float." Just then, Master Genzo appeared at the top of the steps. His old robe fluttered lightly in the sea breeze, and his eyes held the calm of 1,000 dawns. Tao bowed deeply. "Master, this traveler seeks the peace that cannot be disturbed." Genzo looked at the man and said gently, "Come with me." They walked together through the monastery garden. Birds sang, wind rustled through bamboo, and distant waves rolled against the cliffs. "Do you hear that?" the master asked. "Yes," said the traveler. "Birds, wind, and sea." Genzo nodded. "Now listen closely. What sound lies beneath them?" The traveler frowned, straining to hear. After a while he said, "I hear nothing." The master smiled. "That nothing is everything. It is the space that holds every sound, the silence that allows music to exist. That is peace. It's always here, even in the middle of a storm." The traveler stood still for a long time, letting the wind brush his face. Slowly, he began to understand. The silence wasn't the absence of sound, it was the space in which sound appeared and disappeared. And that silence lived not just around him, but within him. Master Genzo turned to him and said softly, "When you return to your city, do not try to escape its noise. Instead, listen through it. Let the clatter of wheels, the voices, the chaos all remind you of the silence beneath. That is where peace lives." Tears welled up in the traveler's eyes. "So peace was never lost. I just forgot how to listen." The master nodded, his smile serene. "Exactly." As the sun began to set, the traveler sat with Tao on the steps once more. The sky turned shades of gold and rose, and the sound of waves echoed softly below. "Will I forget this peace again?" the traveler asked quietly. Tao looked at him, the corners of his mouth lifting gently. "Maybe, but forgetting is also part of remembering. When you lose your way, breathe deeply, and the silence will remind you it never left." The traveler closed his eyes, taking a slow breath. For the first time in years, he didn't feel trapped in the noise of his thoughts. He felt space wide, endless, forgiving. When he finally left the monastery the next morning, he carried no new techniques, no long instructions, only a new way of seeing. And as he walked back toward the noisy world, he smiled, because now he understood. Peace was not in the monastery. It was in the mind that had stopped searching. It was in the heart that had learned to listen. When the traveler left the monastery, the road stretched out before him like a ribbon of quiet possibility. The ocean breeze followed him for miles, as if carrying with it the memory of that sacred silence. He walked through valleys and hills, through forests and farmlands, until finally the landscape began to change. The open spaces faded into streets, and the whisper of wind gave way to the familiar sounds of the city wheels clattering, merchants calling, children laughing, dogs barking. The noise returned like a tide rushing back to shore. Yet this time it didn't feel like an enemy. He could still feel that space Master Genzo had shown him, the space beneath all sound. The noise rose and fell like waves, but inside him was a quiet ocean that did not move. When he reached his home, his wife was waiting by the door. Her face lit up with relief and joy. "You're back," she said softly. "Did you find what you were searching for?" The traveler smiled. "I didn't find it," he said. "I remembered it." That night they ate dinner together in silence. The clinking of bowls, the crackle of the fire, the faint hum of the city beyond their walls, it all blended into one simple, perfect harmony. For the first time, he didn't want to escape it. In the days that followed, he returned to his work. His business was loud, filled with constant chatter and movement. Before his journey, every sound used to irritate him, every request felt heavy, every demand unbearable. But now something had shifted. When someone shouted in frustration, he heard not the anger, but the fear behind it. When a worker made a mistake, he saw not failure, but human effort. When the marketplace roared with noise, he no longer wished it to be quiet. He let it all rise and fall, just as the sea did. Then, each moment became part of a larger rhythm. He began to move through the day with the same awareness Tao had taught him, sweeping not to finish, speaking not to win, working not to conquer, but simply to be. And slowly his world began to change. People noticed that when they spoke to him, he truly listened, not waiting for his turn to respond, but listening as though their words were the only sound in the world. Customers began to trust him more. His workers felt calmer around him. His home became a place of peace, not because it was quiet, but because he was quiet. One afternoon, as he sat by the window, a young assistant asked him, "Sir, you seem so calm these days. Don't you ever feel stressed?" The traveler smiled gently. "Of course I do," he said. "The waves still rise, but I've stopped trying to stop them." The boy frowned, confused. "Then what do you do?" "I let them come," the traveler said softly, "and I watch them go." The assistant nodded slowly, as if trying to understand something much larger than words. Later that evening, the traveler went for a walk through the marketplace. The setting sun painted everything gold, the rooftops, the fruit stalls, the dust rising from the road. He watched people moving in all directions, tired faces, laughing children, arguing couples, singing vendors. Everywhere he looked, he saw life in its raw and restless beauty, just as Master Genzo had described. He found a small bench near the fountain and sat quietly, letting it all flow through him. A child nearby was crying because his toy had broken. A mother comforted him gently. A beggar asked for food. Someone dropped a basket of apples, and they rolled across the stones. None of it was peaceful yet. All of it was perfect. He realized that peace was not the absence of chaos. It was the acceptance of it. The city was not separate from Zen. It was Zen expressed in motion, in sound, in imperfection. At that moment, he felt an immense gratitude rise within him. He silently thanked the noise, the people, the mess of it all, because through them he had found what silence truly meant. When he returned home, his wife was tending to a small garden. She looked up and smiled. "The city seems calmer tonight," she said. He chuckled softly. "The city hasn't changed," he said, "but I think I have." That night he sat by the window once more. The stars shimmered faintly above the rooftops. He closed his eyes and listened, not just to the sounds outside, but to the stillness that held them. The barking dog, the distant laughter, the hum of the night wind. All of it belonged to the same great silence. And within that silence, he whispered words of gratitude for Master Genzo, for Tao, for the mountains, the waves, the noise, and even his own restless journey. Everything had been a teacher. He smiled, feeling the warmth of stillness spreading through his chest. In that moment, he understood that enlightenment was not an escape from the world, but a deep return to it. The city breathed. He breathed with it. And in that shared breath, there was no separation, only peace. Years passed quietly. Seasons folded into one another like pages of a slowly turning book. The traveler's hair had grown streaks of gray, and his steps had become slower, yet lighter, as if each one touched the earth with understanding. His business continued to thrive, but it no longer ruled him. His home was filled with laughter, silence, and simple joys. He taught his children the art of listening, not just to people, but to life itself. And in every corner of his busy world, he carried that same deep peace the monastery had shown him. Yet one night, as he sat by the fire, a thought arose quietly in his heart. "It has been many years since I last saw Master Genzo." The thought lingered like the faint sound of a bell in distant air. The next morning, without much planning, he packed a small bundle of food, left a note for his family, and began walking toward the sea once more. The journey was long. The roads he had once known were now lined with new trees and unfamiliar faces. But as he walked, he noticed how the silence of the monastery lived within him still. Each step was gentle, each breath an act of gratitude. After 3 days of walking, he saw the cliffs again. The sound of the ocean reached his ears before his eyes caught sight of it, steady, eternal, unchanged. His heart filled with warmth and a quiet ache of memory. The monastery looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile, more peaceful. The gates creaked softly as he entered. A few monks were sweeping the courtyard. He asked one of them, "Is Master Genzo still here?" The young monk bowed respectfully and said, "He is, but he has grown very old and rarely leaves his room." The traveler nodded. "May I see him?" The monk led him down a narrow stone path to a small hut near the edge of the cliff, the same place where Tao and Genzo once watched the waves. The door was open. Inside, the master sat by a window, gazing out toward the sea. His body was frail, his hands thin, but his eyes still carried the light of vast skies. The traveler bowed deeply. "Master," he said softly. Genzo turned slowly, his face blooming into a gentle smile. "Ah," he whispered, "the traveler from the city." The man knelt beside him, tears forming in his eyes. "You remember me?" "How could I forget?" Genzo said. "You came here searching for peace among waves, and you found the ocean inside yourself." The traveler nodded, his voice trembling. "You were right, Master. Peace never left. I carried it back into the noise of the city, and I found that even there silence sings." The old monk smiled, his eyes shining with quiet joy. "Good," he said. "Then you have truly learned to see." For a long while they sat together in silence. The ocean's rhythm filled the space between them. Gulls called above and the wind moved gently through the open door. After some time, the traveler spoke again. "Master, I have one last question. All these years I have found peace in life, but what about death? How do I meet it without fear?" Genzo looked out the window again. The sun was lowering toward the horizon, painting the sea with gold and crimson light. "Death," he said softly, "is not the end of peace. It is simply another wave returning to the ocean. He paused, then turned to his old student. Tell me, when a candle burns out, where does its flame go? The traveler thought for a moment. It returns to the air. Genzo nodded gently. Yes. And when a wave disappears, does the ocean lose anything? The traveler's eyes glistened as he whispered, No, master. The wave was never separate. The old monk smiled. Then you understand. What you call this body, this mind is just a form the vast awareness takes for a while. When it dissolves, nothing is lost. The awareness remains, clear and boundless. Tears rolled down the traveler's cheeks, but his heart felt no sadness, only gratitude. Thank you, master, he said quietly. You've given me everything. Genzo's voice softened. No, my friend. I only reminded you of what you already were. The sky does not need to be taught how to be open. The two sat together, watching as the sun sank lower and lower. The horizon seemed to melt into light, the waves catching every shade of gold and rose. The sound of the sea grew softer, slower, as if it too were bowing to the day's end. As darkness began to fall, Genzo whispered, Do you hear it? The traveler closed his eyes. Yes, he said, the silence beneath the waves. That, the old monk said with a faint smile, is where I will go. He turned his gaze once more toward the sea. A stillness filled the room, deep, tender, infinite. And in that sacred silence, the master's breath grew light, then lighter still, until it blended completely with the evening wind. The traveler sat beside him long after night had fallen. The stars shimmered on the water, and the air was filled with the soft rhythm of waves. There was no grief, only a vast, luminous peace. When dawn came, he carried the master's body to the top of the cliff and offered a simple bow. No words, no ceremony, only presence. Then he whispered, You never left, master. You are the sea, the sky, and the silence within me. As he began his journey back down the mountain, he felt the morning sun touch his face, and he smiled through his tears. Because he knew nothing ever truly ends. Every breath, every sound, every moment is just the universe remembering itself. And as he walked away, the wind carried a whisper through the trees, a voice he could almost hear. The sky is still clear, even when the clouds have gone. As the night deepened, the temple slowly fell into silence once again. The only sounds were the soft hum of the wind moving through the bamboo forest and the rhythmic dripping of water from the garden fountain. Dao sat beneath the old plum tree, the one that had bloomed faithfully each spring, even when no one was around to admire it. He watched the moonlight spread across the stone path, silvering everything it touched. In that gentle light, the world looked peaceful, almost holy. He thought about how much time he had spent chasing peace, as if it were a prize hidden behind years of meditation or mountains of knowledge. But now he began to see. Peace had never been absent. It was only his own mind that had turned away from it, searching elsewhere, believing it was something to earn rather than something to notice. The next morning, Dao woke before dawn. The monastery was still wrapped in darkness, and the air was cool and heavy with mist. He walked toward the meditation hall, each footstep echoing softly on the stone floor. As he entered, he saw Master Genzo already sitting there, completely still, like a mountain that had forgotten time. Dao bowed and took his seat beside him. They sat together in silence for what felt like hours, though it might have been only a few moments. Eventually, Dao whispered, Master, last night I understood something. The sky does not chase after stillness. It allows the storms to come and go, and yet it is never disturbed. I think my mind can be the same. Genzo smiled softly, eyes still closed. Then you have tasted freedom, he said. Not the freedom of getting what you want, but the freedom of no longer needing to control what comes. Dao let the words sink in. They felt like warm sunlight touching a frozen lake, slowly melting its surface. After meditation, they walked to the garden together. The mist had begun to lift, revealing tiny drops of dew clinging to each leaf like scattered pearls. Genzo picked up a fallen leaf and handed it to Dao. See this leaf, he said. It did not fight this wind when it fell. It did not cling to the branch in fear. It simply let go when the time came. That is the way of Zen, to fall freely, without resistance, into the arms of life itself. Tao turned the leaf over in his palm, feeling its fragile texture. But master, he asked quietly, what if the mind forgets again? What if the storms return? The storms will always return, Genzo said, his voice calm. But so will the sky. Do not chase peace, Tao. Simply notice when you've forgotten it, and return gently. That is the whole practice. They stood there for a while, watching the first rays of sunlight touch the sea beyond the cliffs. The waves shimmered like liquid glass, endlessly moving, endlessly arriving and leaving. Tao felt as though the whole world was breathing with him. That day, while sweeping the courtyard, Tao no longer hurried through his chores. He noticed the soft crunch of gravel beneath his feet, the weight of the broom in his hands, the gentle rhythm of his breath. Each motion felt complete in itself, needing nothing more. The work was not a distraction from meditation. It was meditation. As the days passed, Tao began to smile more often. The other monks noticed a quiet ease in him, a stillness that wasn't forced. When his thoughts wandered, he didn't scold them anymore. He simply let them pass, like clouds drifting across the vast blue sky. One evening, as he sat by the sea again, Tao whispered to himself, "The ocean doesn't resist the waves. The sky doesn't fear the storms. Why should I fear my own thoughts?" The sound of the waves answered for him, steady, timeless, infinite. And in that sound, he felt the deep truth that all Zen masters had always pointed toward, that peace is not something to find, but something to remember. That night, as Tao closed his eyes, he didn't try to meditate or silence his mind. He simply rested in the quiet, knowing that awareness was already whole, already free. The ocean continued to move, the wind continued to breathe, and Tao, like the sky, simply allowed it all to be. And so, in the soft stillness of that final night, Tao understood that his long journey had never truly been about changing himself. It was about remembering what had never changed. The peace he sought in distant temples, in the silence of meditation, and in the words of wise teachers had always been quietly alive within him, like the calm depth of the ocean beneath every crashing wave. The moon rose higher, casting silver light across the sea. The waves continued their eternal dance. Yet now Tao could see the beauty in their movement, the way they rose and fell without fear, without resistance, just being what they were. He smiled gently, feeling no need to control, to seek, or to fix anything. In that moment, the line between Tao and the world seemed to disappear. The sea breathed, and he breathed with it. The stars shimmered above, and he felt them glowing inside him. Everything that had once felt separate now felt whole, connected, alive. The next morning, when the other monks awoke, they found Tao sitting beneath the plum tree, his eyes closed, a soft smile resting on his face. The first light of dawn touched his robe, and the blossoms above him began to fall, one by one, carried gently by the morning breeze. No one spoke. They simply stood in silence, feeling the same peace that Tao had discovered, the kind of peace that doesn't belong to any one person, but lives quietly in all things. From that day on, whenever the young monks felt restless or lost in thought, they would go and sit beneath the plum tree, and somehow in that place, with the sound of the waves below and the scent of blossoms in the air, their hearts would soften. The wind would whisper through the branches, reminding them, just as Tao had once learned, that nothing needs to be forced. Peace is not something to earn. It's not waiting in the future. It is here, now, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this very moment. And if you listen closely, in the quiet space between thoughts, you'll hear it too, the gentle truth that has always been waiting. You are already whole. You are already home. You have never left the sky. If this journey brought you a moment of stillness or helped you remember the peace within you, take a slow, gentle breath and just let it be. When you're ready, open your eyes softly, carry this calm with you, and know that every moment can be a doorway back to peace. If you'd like to walk further on this path of inner quiet and reflection, remember to like this video, subscribe to Unik Monk, and join this growing circle of gentle souls seeking calm, clarity, and presence. Until we meet again, may your mind be clear, your heart be light, and your breath forever at peace. Tab 3. Tonight we begin a quiet journey into stillness. You do not need to learn, achieve, or prove anything here. This is not a lesson to master or a method to memorize. These are whispers of ancient wisdom, reminders of the peace that has always lived within you. Take a slow breath. Let your shoulders relax. Let your thoughts float like clouds across an open sky. There's nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. Just rest and allow your spirit to soften. Zen teaches us that peace isn't something we must create. It's something we uncover, like a clear mountain lake revealed once the mud settles. Our minds, too, become cloudy only when we struggle against life. When we stop grasping, stop resisting, clarity returns on its own. So breathe slowly, feel your body grow heavier. Let this story carry you inward toward the stillness that cannot be burned away. If this journey brought you peace, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a moment of stillness. Stay till the end and let the calm unfold. In a quiet mountain monastery, far beyond the noise of cities, lived a monk named Kosen. He was known across the land for his immense collection of sacred writings, rare Buddhist sutras, ancient commentaries, and poetry of enlightenment. For over 40 years, Kosen had gathered these works with devotion. His library was unlike any other tall wooden shelves carved by hand, lined with scrolls wrapped in silk. The faint scent of cedar mixed with the sweetness of aged parchment. Morning light streamed through paper windows, painting the room in golden warmth. Each dawn, before the monastery awoke, Kosen would sit within this library reading by candlelight, whispering to the wisdom of centuries. This was his sanctuary, his temple within a temple. But one night in late autumn, while the monks slept, the unthinkable happened. A fierce mountain wind carried sparks from a nearby lantern. Within moments, flames devoured the dry timbers of the monastery. The fire spread swiftly, roaring through the halls like a living creature. The monks escaped unharmed, yet there was no time to save anything else. They stood beneath the cold stars, watching their home and Kosen's beloved library burn to the ground. Scroll after scroll, page after page, 40 years of care and preservation turned to ash before their eyes. When dawn finally came, the smoke still rose from the ruins. The monks gathered silently, their hearts heavy with grief. They turned to their master, expecting tears, despair, perhaps even anger. But Kosen sat upon a stone, facing the blackened remains. His expression was serene, calm as if the rising smoke were incense from a morning ritual. One young monk approached, trembling. "Master," he said softly, "how can you be so calm? Everything you built, everything you loved, it's all gone." Kosen looked at the boy with eyes full of compassion. He smiled gently. "My dear one," he said, placing a hand over his heart, "the teachings written in those books were beautiful, but they were only reflections, not the truth itself. Fire can burn paper, but it cannot burn wisdom. The real Dharma has never been bound by ink or scroll. It lives here." He touched his chest. "And here," he said, touching the young monk's heart. The student persisted, tears in his eyes. "But master, so much knowledge is lost. The generations to come will never read those sacred words." Kosen's smile deepened. "The fire," he said, "has offered us its own teaching. We spent years guarding the finger that points at the moon, forgetting to look up and see the moon itself. Last night, the finger burned away, and now perhaps we can finally see the light it was pointing toward." He rose slowly, brushing the ash from his robe. "Yesterday I was a keeper of books. Today I am a student of impermanence. The fire has not destroyed anything real. It has only revealed what cannot be destroyed." Days passed. The monks rebuilt their home with quiet determination. Yet something had changed. Kosen's teachings, once grounded in ancient words, now flowed directly from his experience. He spoke with simplicity and power. His presence itself became a scripture. Students who traveled from distant lands expecting to study sacred texts found something far greater, a living embodiment of the truths those scrolls had tried to capture. Kozin had been liberated by loss. The fire had stripped away his attachment to form and revealed the essence beneath. He was no longer the curator of wisdom, he had become its expression. This story holds a mirror for all of us. Acceptance does not mean pretending to enjoy loss or pretending that pain does not exist. It means allowing what has already happened to simply be, without resistance. In Zen, suffering begins the moment we argue with reality. When we stop struggling against what is, peace arises naturally, the way the sky returns after a storm. The fire that consumed Kosin's library symbolizes every loss we face, the endings, the heartbreaks, the changes we never asked for. Our instinct is to see such moments as disasters. But what if every burning is also a cleansing? What if the flames that take away what we cling to are also freeing us from the weight of that attachment? When the roles we identified with, the job, the title, the relationship, are stripped away, we often discover something deeper, more enduring, more us. A job lost may reveal a hidden purpose. A broken heart may uncover strength we didn't know we had. Illness may remind us that we are more than the body that carries us. Like Kosin, we may one day realize that what was taken was never truly ours, and what is truly ours can never be taken. So tonight, as you lie here, let go of your grasping. Let go of every thought that says, I must hold on. Let it all burn gently, like old pages turning to light. You do not lose by letting go. You return. You return to what has always been here, the quiet awareness beneath every storm. Breathe in peace. Breathe out resistance. In this silence, you are whole. In this stillness, you are free. The fire has not taken anything away. It has simply shown you what cannot be burned. Sleep deeply, traveler. The truth is safe within you. Take a slow breath in and exhale gently. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the quiet pulse of your heart. Notice how each breath carries away a little more tension, a little more noise. In this calmness, the story continues. And as it unfolds, you may feel your thoughts growing lighter, your spirit more open, your awareness drifting towards something vast and still, a silence that holds you, like the sky holds every cloud. Months passed after the fire. Where once the grand library stood, there was now only a garden of ash and wildflowers. Each morning, the wind carried the scent of earth and smoke, reminding the monks that even from destruction, beauty can bloom. Kozin spent more time outdoors now. He would walk slowly through the courtyard, his hands folded behind his back, his gaze soft, unhurried. The younger monks often followed him at a respectful distance, hoping to absorb even a trace of his quiet presence. He no longer lectured from books or quoted verses. Instead, he spoke through silence, through gestures, through the way he lived each moment. When a monk asked him about enlightenment, Kozin would sometimes point to a falling leaf. When another asked about suffering, he would pour tea and say, "Taste this, the warmth will teach you." His lessons had become life itself, spontaneous, wordless, effortless. Those who listened with their hearts found more wisdom in his stillness than in 100 scrolls of sacred scripture. One evening, the same young monk who had questioned Kozin on the morning after the fire approached him once again. The monk had been struggling not with grief this time, but with confusion. He could not understand how his master remained so peaceful while the world around him continued to change. "Master," he said softly as the two sat beneath a maple tree, "you taught me to accept the fire, and I have tried. But every day brings new losses, new endings. How can we keep finding peace when life keeps taking things away?" Kozin smiled, gazing at the red leaves falling gently to the ground. "Do you see these leaves?" he asked. The monk nodded. "They do not resist the wind," Kozin said. "They do not cling to the branch or curse the season. They fall freely, and in their falling, they complete the purpose for which they were born. Peace," he continued, "does not come from holding on to what we love. It comes from loving fully and still letting go when it is time." The young monk lowered his head, tears shimmering in his eyes. Kozin placed a gentle hand upon his shoulder. "Grief," he said softly, "is not the enemy of peace. It is the doorway to it. To grieve deeply is to love deeply. When love is pure, even loss cannot destroy it, it only transforms it. For a long while they sat in silence, listening to the soft rustle of falling leaves and the evening wind moving through the pines. That night, as the monastery fell quiet, the young monk lay awake beneath the stars. He realized for the first time that nothing in the universe truly ends. It only changes form. The ashes of the burned library had fed the soil. The soil had given rise to flowers. The flowers now swayed gently under the moonlight, each petal carrying the memory of what once was transformed, but not lost. He began to see his own life in the same way. Every loss, every change, every challenge, each was a fire burning away what no longer served him, revealing something new, something true, something eternal beneath the smoke. Years later, when Kozen grew old and his steps became slow, the monks noticed that his presence felt even lighter, as though he were slowly dissolving into the silence he had always spoken of. One morning, as dawn spread across the mountains, the monks gathered in the courtyard. The sky was clear, the air still, and the master stood among them for the last time. He said only a few words. "Do not cling to me, nor to my teachings. The truth is not in the words I spoke, but in the silence between them. If you can rest within that silence, you will find me there always." Later that day, Kozen entered his meditation hall, sat cross-legged on his cushion, and with a calm breath closed his eyes. When the monks checked on him hours later, they found his body perfectly still, a faint smile upon his face. He had slipped gently into the great stillness, as quietly as a candle flame going out. The temple bell rang 3 times, and though sorrow filled the air, so did peace. For every student knew their master had become one with the truth he had lived. And so, as you rest now, remember this. Every ending in your life holds the seed of beginning. Every loss hides a hidden gift. The fires that burn away what you cling to are not your enemies. They are your teachers. They reveal what cannot be taken: your awareness, your stillness, your unshakable peace. When the noise of the world fades, when everything you once thought defined you has fallen away, what remains is the same truth Kozen discovered. You are not the keeper of wisdom. You are wisdom. You are not the seeker of peace. You are peace. So breathe now. Feel the air entering your lungs, the soft rhythm of life moving through you. Let go of every thought, every plan, every fear. Rest in the silence that exists beyond them all. That silence is home. That silence is truth. That silence is you. Sleep deeply, dear listener. The fires of life have already made you whole. And in this moment, nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be found. Only peace remains. Breathe softly. You have journeyed through the fire. You have walked through the ashes. Now imagine yourself standing on the other side of the mountain. The world feels lighter. The air is cooler. The sky above you vast, endless, forgiving. It is dawn again, but this time the light feels different, gentler. Not the blazing fire of transformation, but the first whisper of a new beginning. You hear a stream somewhere nearby, the faint trickle of water moving over stones. You follow the sound. Each step feels effortless, like being guided by something ancient that knows exactly where you need to go. After a short walk through a grove of cedar and bamboo, you see it a river, winding gracefully through the valley. Its surface glimmers with early sunlight, and mist rises gently from the water, as if the river itself is breathing. Beside it sits an old monk in a faded robe. He is neither young nor frail, ageless, timeless. His eyes are half closed, reflecting the calm flow before him. You sit down a few feet away, the earth soft beneath you. The monk turns his head slowly, smiles, and without words, gestures toward the water. "This," he finally says, his voice like wind through bamboo, "is the river that remembers." You look closer. The river seems ordinary, yet something about it feels alive, conscious, aware. The current hums softly, whispering memories of rain, mountain, and cloud. Each droplet carries a story of transformation. Nothing in this river is lost. Everything that it once was returns, renewed. The monk picks up a single leaf and drops it gently into the stream. Watch, he says. The leaf drifts, caught for a moment in a small whirlpool, then freed again, continuing downstream. That leaf, he continues, is like every thought, every emotion, every moment of your life. It arises, dances for a time, then moves on. Only when you try to hold it still to stop the flow does suffering begin. You nod silently, watching the current. It moves without hesitation, without plan, without resistance. It does not fight the rocks in its path. It flows around them. It does not fear the waterfall ahead. It simply becomes it. This, the monk says softly, is what it means to live awake. Not to control the flow of life, but to trust it. To know that even if you cannot see where it leads, you are always being carried home. He dips his hand into the river and lifts a handful of water. The sunlight glimmers through his fingers as the water escapes and falls back. See, he smiles, you can't hold water, but you can feel its coolness. You can let it refresh you, then let it go. He looks at you, eyes filled with gentle clarity. You are not separate from this river. You are part of its flow. Your memories, your dreams, your joys, your losses, they all return to this great current of being. Even when you forget who you are, the river remembers. You close your eyes. You feel the rhythm of the water merging with your breath. Inhale, the river flows in. Exhale, the river flows out. You realize that the same life that moves the river moves through you. Your thoughts rise and fall like waves. Your emotions ripple and settle like eddies in the current. But beneath it all, there is something still, something vast and silent. That silence is not the absence of life. It is life itself. It is the space in which everything appears and disappears, just as the river holds every wave yet remains whole. And in that silence you understand, you do not need to search for peace. Peace has been flowing through you all along. It was never lost, only hidden beneath the noise of resistance. As the sun climbs higher, the monk rises slowly. He looks at the river one last time, then at you. When Kozen's library burned, he says, the fire taught him to let go. When you find your own river, it will teach you to flow. Both are the same lesson, two paths, one truth. He begins to walk away, his figure slowly fading into the morning mist, but his final words linger in the air like a blessing. Remember this, the fire purifies, the river renews, and both lead you back to yourself. Now feel your own river again, your breath. Each inhale, a wave rising, each exhale, a wave returning to the sea. If thoughts appear, let them drift away. If emotions surface, let them pass through. You do not need to fix or chase anything, simply float. The river carries you safely. The current knows the way home. You are weightless, peaceful, free. Let go of everything that tries to hold you above the surface. Sink gently into the calm beneath all movement. There, in that still depth, you will find rest. You will find silence. You will find yourself. Tonight, the river remembers you and welcomes you home. Sleep deeply, traveler of light. You have returned to the flow. You have become the river. The forest had changed, not in its trees or its colors, but in how it felt. Every leaf, every gust of wind now carried a kind of language, a silent whisper that only the still could hear. The monk walked barefoot along the soft, damp soil. The air smelled of rain and old earth. In his hands he carried nothing. The bowl he once used to beg with was gone. His robes now faded to the color of sand. Yet his face held a quiet radiance, like someone who had seen beyond the edge of illusion and found something wordless waiting there. For days he hadn't spoken. For nights he hadn't dreamed. It wasn't that his thoughts had stopped. They had simply become transparent, like clouds that no longer blocked the sun. He came upon a river clear, endlessly flowing. Sitting by it, he watched how every drop surrendered itself to the current without hesitation. It reminded him of what his master once said long ago. When you stop fighting the flow, you realize you are the river. He dipped his fingers into the cool water, and felt a strange warmth rise inside, not from the body but from something deeper, a stillness that breathed. And then it came. That same voice, not from outside, not from memory, but from the center of his silence. The world runs in circles seeking meaning, yet the center never moves. He opened his eyes and looked at the reflection in the water, his own face looking back, shimmering between ripples and light. For the first time, he didn't see himself. He saw everything, the wind, the trees, the mountains all rising and falling in that reflection. He smiled, because he understood. Nothing was missing. Nothing had ever been missing. The ache for purpose, the chase for peace, the fear of time, all illusions of a restless mind. He leaned back, resting against a moss-covered stone, eyes half closed. The world continued, birds singing, water moving, life breathing, and yet inside there was no movement at all. Just presence. That night, as the stars scattered across the dark sky, he whispered only one thing before drifting into sleep. I have reached the place where seeking ends. And in that silence, the forest exhaled with him, one breath, one being, one infinite calm. Dawn rose softly, as if afraid to disturb the silence. Mist hovered over the ground like a veil, and the first light of the sun spilled gold across the trees. The monk sat beneath a Bodhi tree, motionless not out of discipline, but because there was nowhere else to go. He breathed as the world breathed. He existed as existence itself. And then faintly he heard it, a sound breaking the rhythm of the morning, hurried footsteps on dry leaves, stumbling, uneven. From behind the trees emerged a young traveler, dusty and exhausted, his clothes torn by branches, his eyes filled with that familiar unrest, the look of someone chasing something they could not name. He stopped when he saw the monk. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the traveler said, breathless, I've been searching for days. They told me there's a holy man in these woods, someone who's seen truth. The monk didn't reply. He simply looked at the young man, not with judgment, not even curiosity, but with a depth so calm that it made the traveler's words feel suddenly small. Unable to bear the silence, the traveler spoke again. Please, tell me what you found. I've read scriptures, meditated, fasted, but peace escapes me. What am I missing? The monk smiled faintly, as if remembering something distant. He pointed to the river nearby. Do you see the water? The traveler nodded. It flows endlessly, said the monk, yet it never clings to the stones it touches. You hold on too tightly to ideas, to failures, to the image of who you think you are. The traveler frowned. But if I let go of everything, what will be left of me? The monk closed his eyes. Only what has always been there before your thoughts began, before your name was given, before you called this search a path. The traveler sat down beside him, unsure whether to understand or to weep. The monk handed him a small bowl of water from his satchel. The traveler drank it as if it were the first drop of rain in years. Then the monk said softly, Peace is not found, it is remembered. Those words echoed inside the traveler like thunder rolling through distant mountains. The forest around them seemed to listen. Even the wind had grown still. The monk then reached into the dust and drew a circle on the ground. This is the world, he said, always moving, always changing. And this, he touched the unmoving center, is you, the still point within. If you live from here, no storm can touch you. The traveler stared at the circle for a long time. Something in him broke, not in pain, but in release. The weight he carried in his chest began to dissolve. Tears fell silently, not from sorrow, but from remembering. The monk said nothing more. He simply watched the sun climb higher, lighting up the path the traveler had come from. When the young man finally rose to leave, he bowed deeply and whispered, Thank you. The monk only smiled and said, Don't thank me. Thank the silence between us. It did the real teaching. The traveler walked away, his steps lighter, his shadow softer. And when he looked back one last time, the monk was gone as if he had never been there at all. only the whisper of wind through the trees and the sound of the river, endlessly flowing. Days turned into weeks as the traveler made his way down from the mountain. Each step felt lighter than the one before, as though some invisible chain had been quietly removed. The road he once feared seemed to welcome him now. The trees no longer loomed as shadows, they stood as witnesses. There was no sudden enlightenment, no dramatic vision, only a quiet, expanding stillness that followed him everywhere. At night, he would sit beside small village fires. People would ask, "Where have you come from?" And he would simply smile and answer, "From silence." They would laugh politely, not understanding, but something in his calmness disarmed their doubts. When he finally reached his village, it looked unchanged, the same narrow streets, the same noise of the marketplace, the same endless arguments about grain, weather, and politics. Yet to him, everything felt different. The same old sounds no longer pierced his mind. They simply passed through, like wind through bamboo. He saw his old friends. Some greeted him with joy, others questioned his long absence. One of them, a merchant, said sharply, "You've wasted months wandering in the mountains. Did you at least find what you were looking for?" The traveler looked at him, smiling softly. "I lost what I didn't need to find." The merchant frowned. "You speak in riddles." "Perhaps," said the traveler, "but the truth often sounds like one until you live it." That night, as the village slept, the traveler sat alone beneath a tree, the same way he had seen the monks sit by the river. The moonlight shimmered over his face. A small child, curious and sleepless, approached him. "Sir," the boy whispered, "my father says monks and wanderers are people who've run away from the world. Is that true?" The traveler looked up at the stars before answering. "No, child. They are people who stopped running inside." The boy thought about it for a moment, then asked, "What did you see up there in the mountains?" The traveler smiled. "I saw a fire once and I thought it was destruction, but it was teaching me to see what remains after the fire goes out." The boy blinked. "What remains?" The traveler placed a gentle hand on the boy's chest. "This, what never burns." For the first time, the child didn't ask another question. He simply sat down beside him and looked at the stars. In that quiet, something sacred passed between them, not as words, but as stillness. Weeks later, villagers began to notice subtle changes. The traveler, once restless and quick-tempered, now moved through life as though guided by an invisible rhythm. When people quarreled, he listened. When they wept, he stayed beside them without offering solutions. Some came to him for advice, expecting clever words or quotes from scripture, but he rarely spoke much. He would say things like, "Sit with your problem until it grows tired of itself," or, "When the water stops stirring, it reflects everything clearly." They left either puzzled or profoundly comforted, often both. It wasn't that he had become a teacher, it was that he had become transparent. People could see their own peace reflected in him. And though the traveler never returned to the mountain, he carried the silence of that place wherever he went. In the noise of the marketplace, he heard it. In the cries of children, he heard it. In the death of a loved one, he felt it not as loss, but as continuation. One evening, while sitting at the river's edge, an old monk passing through stopped and bowed to him. "I have traveled far," said the monk. "I heard there is a wise man here who found peace without withdrawing from the world. Do you know him?" The traveler smiled faintly and gestured to the flowing river. "I only know this one. It has been teaching me ever since I left the mountains." The monk watched the current for a long time, then nodded in understanding. Without another word, he continued his journey. The traveler remained, listening to the sound of water meeting stone, each ripple a reminder that peace was never found in isolation, but in returning to the world with open eyes, seeing that even in the heart of chaos, stillness never leaves. He whispered into the night breeze as if speaking to his old teacher, "Master, the fire did not end your library. It lit my way home." And the river answered, not in words, but in the endless, quiet sound of flowing. The seasons turned slowly in the mountain village. Spring came again, with tender green leaves whispering in the breeze. The traveler's small hut, once on the edge of town, had become a quiet refuge for those seeking rest, not because he invited them, but because peace itself seemed to live there. Each morning he would sweep the courtyard, light a single candle, and sit by the doorway, watching the sun spill across the valley. He had no disciples, no temple, no followers, yet people began arriving, one by one. A farmer came first, burdened by debt and sleepless nights. He sat near the traveler in silence for hours. When he finally spoke, he said, "I don't know why, but sitting here, the noise inside me is softer." The traveler smiled and said quietly, "When the wind grows too strong, even the river hides beneath the rocks. It doesn't fight the storm. It simply waits." Another week passed and a mother arrived, grieving the loss of her child. She knelt before the traveler, her tears falling like rain onto the ground. He didn't comfort her with words. He simply bowed his head and wept with her. When she finally asked, "Will this pain ever end?" he answered, "When the river meets the sea, do you think the water remembers the mountain?" She closed her eyes and felt something shift, not an ending of grief, but an opening within it. Soon, more villagers began to visit, not because they sought miracles, but because the traveler's silence made them feel seen. There were no sermons, no rules, only presence. Sometimes they would sit together, saying nothing, listening to the rustle of trees or the rhythm of their breath. And in that stillness, small transformations began to bloom. The merchant who once mocked him now visited every dawn before opening his shop. The woodcutter, known for his temper, began offering free firewood to widows. The children, who once ran wild, started playing quietly near the traveler's hut, pretending to meditate. Peace was spreading not as a command, but as contagion. One evening, the traveler was approached by a young woman carrying a scroll. She had journeyed from a distant monastery that had heard rumors of a man who teaches without teaching. She bowed deeply and said, "Master, I have studied the scriptures since childhood. I've read the sutras, the Upanishads, the commentaries of ancient sages. But still, my mind does not rest. Please tell me what I'm missing." The traveler looked at her for a long time. Then he gestured to the candle burning between them. "Tell me," he said softly, "when this candle burns, what happens to the flame?" "It gives light," she replied. "And when the candle is finished?" "The flame disappears," she said. The traveler shook his head. "No, the flame returns to where it always was, the space around it. The wax and wick were never its prison, only its temporary home." She sat in silence, the meaning sinking in slowly that her restless search, her constant effort to contain truth, was the wick that needed to burn away. As months passed, the traveler's name spread to towns beyond the valley. People called him the monk of the wind because he moved through life without resistance, gentle yet unshakable. He would often say to visitors, "Peace is not learned, it is remembered. It was with you before you knew your name." One night, as the monsoon rain fell endlessly, the traveler sat by the window listening. The sound of thunder rolled across the mountains, and suddenly, in a flash of lightning, he saw the reflection of his old teacher, Kosen, sitting beside him, smiling in silence. It wasn't a vision of the eyes, but a recognition of spirit. He bowed deeply to the empty space, whispering, "Master, your fire still burns, but now it lights 1,000 hearts." He realized then that true teaching was never about passing knowledge. It was about igniting remembrance. In the following years, the village itself transformed quietly. Arguments grew fewer. Laughter lingered longer. The people began lighting candles at dusk, not as a ritual, but as a reminder that even in darkness, there is a light that does not belong to wax or flame. The traveler aged gracefully. His hair turned silver, his steps slower, his smile softer, yet his presence remained timeless, untouched by years. And one morning, when the sun rose over the eastern ridge, the villagers found him seated beneath a great Bodhi tree, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees, the faintest smile on his lips. He had passed silently in meditation, like a candle that burned to its last moment, leaving behind not smoke, but fragrance. The villagers built no shrine, carved no statue. They simply left his hut as it was open to the wind, filled with stillness. Because they understood what he had taught, the flame was gone, but the light had never left. Years passed, then decades. The little mountain village changed. New homes were built, paths widened, and children who once played under the old Bodhi tree grew into elders with gentle wrinkles and stories that shimmered like candlelight. But even as time reshaped the land, one thing never faded: the memory of the silent traveler who had once lived among them. His small hut still stood at the edge of the valley. No one dared to claim it, for it had become more than wood and stone. It was a place of stillness. Pilgrims who wandered the mountain trails often found themselves drawn there, unaware why. Some said they could feel a strange serenity the moment they stepped near. The wind that passed through the open windows seemed to whisper old lessons, not in words, but in presence. One crisp morning, long after most had forgotten his name, a young monk named Rio arrived in the valley. He had been traveling for months, searching for a place where his restless spirit might find rest. His robe was torn, his feet blistered, his eyes carrying the weariness of too many questions unanswered. When he reached the old hut, he noticed how time had embraced it. Ivy curling around the doorframe, moss painting the stones, and silence thicker than any chant. He stepped inside. The air was cool, almost sacred. A faint smell of sandalwood lingered, as if the past had never fully left. In the center of the room sat a single object, a small clay bowl, cracked yet perfectly balanced on a low wooden table. Inside it was a bit of dried wax, as if someone had once extinguished a candle there and never relit it. The monk sat down before it, crossing his legs, letting his body fall into stillness. He had read countless sutras, memorized entire scriptures, and debated with masters in great temples, yet none of it had quieted the noise within him. But here, in the silent hut, surrounded by nothing but the hum of wind and memory, something began to change. His breath slowed, his thoughts softened, the edges of the world blurred. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to meditate. He was simply being. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, a soft wind entered through the broken window, brushing against his cheek. In that wind, he felt something ancient, as though the mountain itself was breathing with him. A faint image appeared in his mind, an old man sitting under a tree, smiling gently, his eyes filled with infinite peace. Rio whispered, without thinking, "Are you the one they call the monk of the wind?" And though no voice answered, a quiet understanding bloomed in his chest. He realized that the peace he sought was not in this hut. It was not left behind by the monk. It had always been within him, waiting to be noticed. The next morning, Rio gathered the villagers. They told him stories, fragments passed down through generations. They spoke of how the monk had once helped a grieving mother find peace without words, how he had calmed storms of anger simply by listening, how he had died sitting upright beneath the Bodhi tree, smiling like one who had just remembered a beautiful secret. Rio bowed deeply. That night, he lit a new candle in the old clay bowl. As the flame flickered, he whispered, "Master of the wind, your silence still speaks." He made a vow not to rebuild the temple, not to carve statues, not to collect disciples, but to carry this stillness wherever he went. Years later, travelers would speak of a young monk who wandered the land barefoot, helping villagers rebuild after storms, teaching children how to listen to the rain, and sitting quietly beside those in sorrow. He never introduced himself as a teacher, but people began to call him the Whisper Monk. For his words were few, yet they settled deep into the heart. Whenever someone asked where he had learned such peace, he would smile and say, "From a man I never met, who taught without speaking." The legacy of the Wind Monk lived on not through temples or scriptures, but through a lineage of hearts that had tasted stillness. No monuments marked his name, yet his presence became immortal, flowing through the veins of mountains, carried by the breath of wind, and whispered by candles that burn quietly in countless homes. Even now, if one walks into that valley on a moonlit night and listens closely, they might hear the wind moving gently through the trees, not as a sound but as a feeling. A reminder that nothing truly sacred is ever lost. It only changes form. Just as the flame returns to the space it came from, so too does wisdom return to silence. And in that silence, the wind monk still smiles everywhere. 1,000 seasons passed. The mountain remained its ridges kissed by snow, its roots wrapped in mist. Empires rose and fell in the valleys below, but up here, time had a softer rhythm. The Bodhi tree still stood, though older and hollowed by years of wind and rain. Its roots clung to the earth like ancient fingers remembering the pulse of life. Beneath it, grass grew wild, where once the monk of the wind had meditated in silence. The hut, too, had mostly surrendered to nature. Its roof had caved in, its walls taken by moss and vines, and yet if you stood quietly enough, you could still sense the echo of something sacred in the air. The villagers rarely climbed that far anymore. Only the shepherds and wandering pilgrims knew of the old path, a narrow trail that wound up the mountain like a forgotten prayer. One spring morning, as the mist began to lift, a young girl named Sora wandered up that very path. She was no monk, no seeker, just a curious child chasing a stray goat. Her laughter echoed through the valley, light and unguarded. She followed the sound of bells tied around the goat's neck until she reached the clearing where the old Bodhi tree stood. There, she stopped. The world felt different here, quieter, as if the air itself was listening. Sunlight broke through the clouds, falling gently through the branches like threads of gold. Dust shimmered in the light, moving as if alive. The girl felt her heartbeat slow without knowing why. For reasons she could not explain, she sat down beneath the tree. Her goat wandered off, but she didn't follow. Instead, she picked up a fallen leaf and turned it over in her tiny hands, watching how the veins glowed like rivers of light. Then, without trying, she closed her eyes. What she felt in that moment could not be taught in temples or written in scrolls. It was a peace that had no name, a silence that didn't feel empty, but full. The wind brushed her cheeks softly, as if recognizing her. It carried with it a faint fragrance, something between sandalwood and rain. Somewhere in the stillness, she thought she heard a whisper, not in words, but in meaning. "Welcome back." Her breath deepened naturally. She didn't know she was meditating. No one had told her how. Yet she entered the same stillness that had once surrounded Kosin, and later the wind monk, and later the whisper monk who carried that flame forward. When she finally opened her eyes, everything looked the same: the grass, the sunlight, the valley below. But something inside her had shifted. The mountain no longer looked like stone, it looked alive. The clouds no longer floated, they danced. The world, for the first time, felt whole. She stood, brushed off the grass, and began her walk back down. As she descended, she felt a strange certainty, though she didn't know what it meant that she would return here often. Years passed, and Sora grew into a young woman. She often climbed to the tree in moments of sadness or confusion. Sometimes she would simply sit in silence. Other times she would whisper her thoughts to the wind, not expecting answers, but finding peace in the asking. And though she never heard a reply, she always left lighter, as if something unseen had listened with perfect understanding. One day, as she sat under the tree, a wandering monk appeared, old, kind-eyed, dressed in simple robes. He had come from far away, searching for solitude. When he saw Sora sitting there, he bowed and asked, "Do you come here often, child?" Sora smiled and nodded. "It's peaceful here. I don't know why, but when I sit here, everything feels right." The monk gazed around the tree, the wind, the open sky, and smiled. He too could feel it. That same stillness, that same quiet energy that had lingered for centuries. He placed his palms together and whispered, "Ah, so the mountain still remembers." From that day on, Sora and the monk met often. He never taught her formally. They simply shared silence, watching the clouds, the birds, the setting sun. Sometimes they would laugh without reason. Other times they would sit for hours without speaking. In their shared quiet, something invisible was being passed down, the same flame of peace that had burned through generations. Wordless, timeless, indestructible. Years later, when the monk passed away under the same Bodhi tree, Sora stayed beside him until dawn. When she finally rose, she lit a small candle in a clay bowl she had brought with her, placing it at the base of the tree. The wind blew softly, not enough to extinguish the flame, just enough to make it dance. She smiled and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me what was never lost." And then, for the first time in centuries, the sound of a bell echoed through the mountain, once again a sound not of mourning, but of awakening. From that day, travelers began coming again, some seeking peace, some seeking answers, and some not knowing what they sought at all. Sora welcomed them with tea, silence, and kindness, the three offerings of her teacher. And as they sat beneath the old Bodhi tree, many of them too felt the same quiet shift, the one that begins not in the mind, but in the heart. Centuries may pass, the mountain will change, the tree may fall and grow again. But what began with the silent monk will never truly end. Because stillness does not die, it only returns. And if you listen carefully tonight as the wind moves softly past your window, as your breath deepens and your thoughts drift like clouds, you might feel it too. The same silence that once lived on that mountain lives in you now. It always has, it always will. So rest. The mountain is watching over you. The wind remembers your name, and the stillness that began long ago has finally come home. The night was quiet. The stars hung low, shimmering like old memories, each one a whisper of a life once lived, a prayer once spoken. Down in the valley, the wind moved through fields of wild grass, bending them in slow waves that shimmered like liquid silver under the moon. The mountain stood above all, timeless, patient, eternal. And at its heart, beneath the ancient Bodhi tree, a small flame burned. Sora had tended it for years, a single candle, kept alive through storm and silence. She never thought of it as sacred, never called it divine. To her, it was simply a reminder that even the smallest light could outlive darkness, if guarded with love. One evening, as the mist rolled in from the east, Sora felt something shift in the air. The world seemed to pause, the kind of stillness that comes not from silence, but from deep listening. She looked up, and for the first time in her life, she saw the mountain breathe. Not literally, but the air around her moved in rhythm with her heartbeat. The trees swayed in perfect balance. Even the distant sound of running water seemed to slow, as if waiting for something unseen to arrive. Sora closed her eyes. Inside that moment, she felt herself dissolve, not disappearing, but expanding. The boundaries between her breath and the wind faded. Her thoughts became clouds, passing, changing, vanishing. She felt every heartbeat of the earth, every whisper of leaf and stone, every pulse of life woven into a single, infinite pattern. There was no separation now, no self to protect, no world to control, only one vast presence, quiet, ancient, aware. And then she heard it again, the voice from long ago. Not from outside, but from within. You are not the flame. You are the space it burns in. Tears filled her eyes, though she didn't know why. Perhaps it was love. Perhaps it was memory. Perhaps both were the same thing. In that stillness, she saw them all: the monk of the wind, the whispering sage, the silent one who had once meditated beneath this very tree. They were not gone. They had simply become the silence. And now, she was part of it too. When she opened her eyes, the world glowed differently. Every drop of dew reflected 1,000 tiny universes. The night air felt like silk upon her skin. The flame flickered gently beside her, and for the first time she realized it didn't need her anymore. It could live on its own. She smiled, leaned forward, and whispered softly, "Thank you for teaching me how to listen." And then she let it go. The wind carried the flame upward, not as smoke, but as light. It rose through the branches, spiraling into the stars, until it was gone from sight, but not from being. In the village below, people awoke that night feeling strangely peaceful. Some dreamed of clear water, some of soft laughter echoing across mountains. Others simply felt, without knowing why, that something ancient had finally returned home. When dawn came, the air was clearer than it had been in years. Birds sang in soft waves, and the mountain, bathed in gold, seemed to smile. Many generations later, travelers who climbed that path still spoke of the place. They said that when you sit under the Bodhi tree, you don't hear silence, you become it. No one knows Sora's name anymore. The stories have faded into whispers, the path half swallowed by grass and rain. And yet, when the wind moves just right, you can still feel it, a pulse, a warmth, like a breath that never stopped breathing. It is the same flame not in the candle, but in every living thing. Close your eyes now. Breathe. Inhale the same air that touched your face that night. Exhale the same wind that carried the flame to the stars. Listen. There it is, the sound beneath all sounds, the stillness that has never left you. It doesn't speak in words. It doesn't demand belief. It simply waits quietly for you to remember. Because you are not searching for peace. You are made of it. And when you finally stop running, you'll realize you never left the mountain. The story ends here, but the silence continues alive in your breath, in the pause between thoughts, in the space where everything returns to what it has always been. Eternal, unbroken, home. The night has deepened. The stars have drifted into their quiet watch, and somewhere in the unseen folds of the universe, a small light moves, not burning, not fading, simply being. It is said that when a flame completes its purpose, it does not vanish, it transforms. It becomes the warmth in every sunrise, the shimmer across the surface of still water, the silent pulse behind every breath. That flame, the one Sora released beneath the ancient Bodhi tree, did not die that night. It became a whisper moving through time. If you listen closely, you can still hear it, not with your ears, but with that quiet space behind your heart. It begins softly, like the sound of a candle inhaling its first breath. Do not search for me in temples of stone, nor in the pages of sacred words. I am not bound by form. I am the space within all things. The whisper moves like wind through reeds, gentle, effortless, knowing. When you sit beneath the open sky, I am the silence between stars. When you breathe in sorrow, I am the stillness that holds your tears. In time, the whisper became a teaching, not spoken, but felt. It reached travelers who had lost their way in the mountains, monks who questioned the meaning of their meditation, and wanderers who had long forgotten the sound of their own hearts. To each, the flame spoke differently, but the truth was always the same. You were never lost, you simply forgot how to stand still. One such traveler, a young seeker named Rin, came to the mountain centuries after Sora's time. He had read countless books, memorized sacred verses, and carried scrolls of wisdom in his satchel. But his mind was restless. He felt knowledge without peace, words without weight. He climbed for 3 days through mist and rain until he reached the Bodhi tree. There was no temple now, no relic, no offering, only silence, and the faint scent of old cedar. He sat beneath it, weary and confused, and whispered into the wind, "Teach me how to be free." The flame, though unseen, heard his plea. It had watched for ages not as something separate, but as the quiet awareness within every seeker's heart. That night the wind stilled, the stars dimmed, and in the hush between breaths, Rin felt a presence beside him, ancient, weightless, luminous. It was not a voice this time. It was understanding, a transmission not through sound but through being. He felt the earth beneath him, vast and patient. He felt his breath gentle, endless, and then he felt the boundary dissolve, the illusion that he was apart from anything. For the first time he understood, peace is not found, it is remembered. When morning came, the mist parted to reveal the valley below, endless, golden, breathing. Rin smiled through tears. He unpacked his scrolls and one by one released them into the river. He watched as the ink bled into the current, turning the water into lines of floating poetry. "May every word return to silence," he whispered. Years passed. Travelers who came after spoke of a monk who lived in the valley and never preached. He tilled the soil, repaired bridges, and tended the lamps at dusk. And yet those who met him said they felt lighter afterward, as if they had put down something they didn't know they were carrying. When asked his name, he simply smiled. I am no one, he said, just a caretaker of light. But at night, when he sat beside the quiet stream, a soft glow would surround him, and those who saw it said it was as if the flame itself had returned, not as fire, but as presence. Centuries fade, empires rise and fall, mountains erode, rivers change their course. But still the whisper continues. Sometimes it hides in the hush before dawn. Sometimes it travels in the breath of wind through pines. Sometimes it lives in you in the brief pause between two thoughts. It says, do not seek to escape the storm. Become the calm that holds it. Do not ask the world to change. Learn to see it as it truly is infinite, unfolding, whole. Close your eyes now. Feel your breath soft, ancient, circular. Notice the silence that surrounds it. That is not emptiness. It is awareness watching itself. That awareness is the flame. It has no name, no shape, no beginning or end. It is older than the stars and yet as near as your next inhale. When you breathe, it breathes with you. When you love, it shines through you. When you let go, it sets you free. And so the flame continues not in temples, not in words, but in every quiet heart that dares to listen. It does not ask for worship. It asks only for presence. For in the end, all teachings, all journeys, all seeking lead to the same discovery. You were never the one searching for light. You were the light, learning to see itself. So tonight, as the stars gather like soft embers above, let the whisper of the flame reach you. Let it remind you not of what you must do, but of what you already are. Peace, awareness, infinity in human form. And as you drift into rest, know this truth. The flame has never left you. It only waited for your stillness to remember. The night sky stretched endlessly above, a quiet canvas where even the stars seemed to pause as if listening. In that silence, you could feel something ancient stirring a vibration older than thought, gentler than breath. It wasn't sound exactly, but presence, a living awareness that hummed softly beneath every heartbeat of the universe. That presence is what the monks once called the sound of stillness. It is not heard through the ears, but through surrender. It begins when the noise within finally bows to silence, when we stop trying to control, fix, or prove anything, and simply allow existence to be what it is. Sora's flame had long since become light in many hearts. Rin's river had carried wisdom across lands unknown, and now in a distant valley blanketed by mist, a single traveler arrived tired, heart-heavy, and full of questions that life had never answered. He had heard whispers of this valley, a place where silence speaks and the wind itself teaches. He did not come seeking enlightenment, for he had given up on that long ago. He came only to rest. He found a small hut by the river, its lamp glowing faintly through the fog. He entered and found an old monk sitting beside a single candle. The monk looked up and smiled, not as a stranger greeting a guest, but as silence recognizing itself. Sit, the monk said softly, his voice as calm as falling snow. You've traveled far enough. The traveler sat, and for a long time neither spoke. The fire crackled, and the river outside whispered against stones. Finally, the traveler sighed. I have studied so many paths, he said. I have prayed, meditated, chanted, but my heart is still restless. Why can't I find peace? The old monk closed his eyes. Because, he said, you have been listening to the world, but not to the silence beneath it. The traveler frowned. What do you mean? The monk gestured toward the candle flame. Look at this light, he said. The flame dances, flickers, and changes shape, yet what allows it to exist? The traveler thought for a moment. The air, he said. The monk smiled. Yes, the unseen supports the seen. The silent gives life to the sound. The formless gives birth to form. But we humans, we chase the dance of the flame and forget the air that holds it. He leaned closer. True peace is not the absence of thought. It is the space in which thought appears and disappears. When you listen not to the noise, but to the silence, between each sound, you begin to hear the eternal. The traveler gazed at the flame and for the first time noticed the stillness surrounding it, a vast quiet, so complete it seemed to cradle the entire world. The monk spoke again. "Close your eyes," he said. "Listen not to me, but to what exists behind every word I speak." And so the traveler closed his eyes. He listened. At first he heard the river outside, soft, rhythmic, endless. Then he heard the fire, tiny crackles, small bursts of warmth. And beneath that, he heard his own breath, slow, fragile, human. But soon even those sounds began to fade into something deeper, a kind of quiet hum, a boundless field of presence that stretched far beyond his body, beyond thought, beyond self. It wasn't silence as he once knew it. It was alive. He felt as though every cell in his being was exhaling after years of holding on. His body softened, his mind untangled, his heart felt weightless. Time dissolved. There was no night, no day, no monk, no traveler, only stillness, listening to itself. It was here, in this sacred nothingness, that the traveler finally understood. Peace had never been missing. It was simply waiting for him to stop searching. When he opened his eyes, the candle had burned low. The monk was still, eyes closed, breathing softly in harmony with the room itself. The traveler bowed his head. "Thank you, master," he whispered. But the monk did not reply. He simply smiled, as though the question had never existed at all. That night, the traveler slept with the ease of a child resting in his mother's arms. And as he dreamed, the sound of stillness continued, a soft hum beneath all creation. He dreamed of stars breathing with him, of rivers speaking in light, of mountains rising and dissolving into clouds. He dreamed of himself as wind, as flame, as infinite space. When morning came, the valley was bathed in gold. The traveler woke, not as the person who had arrived, but as silence wearing human form. He understood now why the master spoke so little. There are truths that words can only weaken. Before leaving, he turned to the monk and asked quietly, "What should I do now?" Monk opened his eyes. "Do," he repeated, smiling. "Simply be. Carry the silence with you. Let it speak when you cannot. Let it teach when the world forgets." The traveler nodded slowly, and as he walked down the valley, he noticed something astonishing. Every sound was music. Every breeze carried meaning. Every heartbeat echoed eternity. The world had not changed. Only his listening had. And so the sound of stillness continues not as a story, not as a teaching, but as a living pulse within you. Whenever life grows loud and your thoughts begin to storm, close your eyes. Take one slow breath and listen not to what is happening, but to the space that holds it all. There, in that space, you will find the monk. You will find Sora. You will find every flame that ever burned. And most of all, you will find yourself. Because the stillness you seek is the one who is listening now. Pause, breathe. Let this truth rest in your heart. Peace does not come when the world grows quiet. It comes when you do. As you drift into sleep tonight, let the sound of stillness cradle your thoughts. Let the silence between breaths carry you home. There is nothing left to learn, nothing left to become. You are already the silence that the universe has been trying to remember. Sleep peacefully, dear one. The sound of stillness is already within you. There are moments in life when silence itself begins to breathe. When what you once thought was emptiness reveals itself as something alive, aware, and infinite. And from that infinity, something begins to stir softly at first, like the glow before sunrise. It's not sound, not sight. It's warmth. The kind of warmth that doesn't come from fire or touch, but from the center of being, a quiet radiance that grows from stillness, spreading gently through every cell, every thought, every memory. That warmth is love, but not the kind we read in books or chase in stories. It is the love that simply is. The love that asks for nothing, owns nothing, and yet holds everything. It is the love that arises when the heart finally remembers its true nature. And when that happens, The heart becomes light. In a small village hidden between emerald hills, the traveler from the valley, now older, gentler, walked the quiet path before dawn. His hair had turned silver, but his eyes were clearer than ever, like deep pools reflecting the whole sky. He carried no possessions, no scripture, no robe that marked him as a monk. Only a small lamp, a simple flame enclosed in glass, lit by the same spark that once burned beneath a Bodhi tree generations ago. Wherever he went, people gathered not because he spoke of truth, but because truth spoke through him. He did not teach, he listened. He did not preach, he smiled. And in that smile, the weary found peace. The lost found direction. The fearful found courage. They called him the Silent One, though he often laughed softly when he heard it, for he knew that true silence is not the absence of sound, it is the fullness of love. One day a young woman came to him, trembling. She had lost everything: her family, her home, her will to live. Her voice was weak as she knelt before him. "Master," she whispered, "they tell me to meditate, to pray, to be strong, but I can't. The pain is too much. My heart feels like it's made of stone. How can I find peace when love has left me?" The Silent One looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "Who told you that love has left you?" She looked up, confused. "I watched it die," she said bitterly. "I buried it myself." He shook his head slowly. "You buried the body of a memory," he said softly, "but not love. Love does not die. It only changes its form from what you hold in your hands to what holds you from within." He reached out, touched her trembling hand, and continued, "When a seed falls into the earth, it must break to grow. It feels the darkness pressing in, the soil heavy above it, and it thinks it is dying. But in truth, that breaking is its birth. Your heart is the same. Pain is the cracking open that allows light to enter." The woman began to cry, not from sorrow, but from recognition. Her tears fell like rain upon dry soil, and something deep inside her stirred a warmth she hadn't felt in years. The Silent One smiled. "You see," he said, "the heart does not need to be fixed. It only needs to be allowed." That night as she slept, the woman dreamed of the lamp he carried. Its flame did not burn with heat, but with calm radiance, the same gentle glow she felt in her chest when she had finally let go. When she awoke, the Silent One was gone, but his words lingered like soft light on her skin. The years passed. The traveler grew older still, his steps slower, his breaths longer, yet his presence only deepened. Villagers often said that when he walked through the fields, flowers seemed to turn toward him. Birds followed him in the trees, and even the wind softened its voice. But what they felt was not magic. It was resonance. It was what happens when one heart fully remembers its own silence. It radiates peace without trying, because peace has become its nature. One evening, as the sun sank into the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson, the Silent One sat by a small river. He had returned to the place where his teacher once lived, the Valley of Stillness. The water shimmered. The air smelled of cedar and wet stone. He watched the reflection of the sunset in the rippling surface and smiled to himself. "I have carried your silence well, old friend," he whispered. "It has become my heart's voice." Then he placed the small lamp beside the riverbank, where the flame flickered softly in the growing dusk. "May this light find new hands," he said quietly, "for love must move to stay alive." As night fell, he closed his eyes and began to breathe with the rhythm of the river. Each inhale became the sound of the tide. Each exhale became the song of the wind. And as his final breath left him, something extraordinary happened. The lamp's flame did not go out. It lifted slowly, rising into the air like a firefly at twilight. Higher, higher it drifted, until it became a single star in the night sky. From that night onward, people in the valley said that whenever grief touched their hearts, a soft light would appear in their dreams, a golden warmth that asked nothing, promised nothing, but brought peace to the restless. They called it the light of the heart. That is what happens when silence blossoms into love. It no longer hides in meditation halls or temples. It moves through every act of kindness, every quiet forgiveness, every breath that asks for nothing in return. Because love is not something you give. It is what you are when you stop pretending to be anything else. So tonight, as you rest, place your hand gently on your heart. Feel that warmth, that pulse. It is not just blood moving through veins. It is light ancient, boundless, compassionate. It is the same flame that burned beneath the Bodhi tree, the same flame that guided the Silent One through the valley, the same flame that lives in you now. Breathe slowly. Inhale the silence. Exhale the light. With every breath, let your heart become a little brighter. With every heartbeat, let love move outward to the people you miss, to the memories you fear, to the parts of yourself you still hide. Do not hold it back. Light cannot be kept. It must travel. And if one day you feel alone again, remember you are the lamp and the flame. When your heart becomes light, you no longer seek peace. You become peace. You no longer chase love. You are love. And even in the darkest night, your very being whispers to the stars, I am home. I am whole. I am the light I was seeking. When the heart becomes light is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of living it moment by moment, breath by breath, in a world that needs your quiet glow. Sleep now. Let the flame within you rise gently to meet the dawn. Because even when your eyes close, your heart still shines. When the heart becomes light, something beautiful and almost imperceptible begins to happen. You stop moving through the world. Instead, the world begins to move through you. Every sound, every breeze, every ripple of emotion passes gently across the surface of awareness, like wind brushing over still water. And in that vast stillness, you begin to notice something extraordinary. There is no boundary between you and it. There never was. The Silent One's lamp, the one he left by the riverbank, continued to glow softly through the ages. Rain came. Winds came. The river swelled and shrank, yet the flame somehow never went out. Villagers told their children, this light has no fuel, no wick, no oil. It burns on silence itself. And in time, the story became a myth, and the myth became a song mothers hummed to their children on nights when the moon refused to rise. It was said that if you followed that river far enough, beyond the forests and the stone ridges, you would find its true source, a place where dreams dissolve and eternity flows like water. They called it the river beyond dreams. Many lifetimes after the Silent One had departed, a young seeker named Anaya heard the story and could not forget it. She was a wanderer, born in a world of ceaseless noise of voices, preaching truth yet knowing none. Her heart was restless, her mind sharp as a blade, but her spirit tired. One night, unable to sleep, she whispered to the wind, if there is a river beyond dreams, show me the way. The wind replied not in words, but in a soft rustle of leaves that sounded almost like a heartbeat. That night, she began her journey. For 7 days, she walked through dust and thunder. For 7 nights, she crossed valleys where even the stars seemed to sleep. On the 8th night, she reached the edge of a vast plain. There, under a twilight sky, she saw a faint glimmer on the horizon, a silver thread winding through the earth. It was the river, silent, endless, moving like liquid glass beneath the breath of the universe. As she approached, the air around her grew lighter, not in temperature, but in essence. It was as though gravity itself was softening. Her thoughts slowed. Her heartbeat faded into rhythm with the current. She knelt by the water's edge and whispered, "Are you real?" The river answered, but not with sound. It spoke directly to her being, a vibration felt rather than heard. "I am what flows when the dreamer awakens." Anaya trembled. She reached out, letting her fingers touch the surface. The moment her skin met the water, memories began to shimmer and break apart childhood faces. Long forgotten fears, laughter, tears, regrets, all dissolving into ripples of light. She tried to pull back, but the river whispered again, "Do not fear the dissolving. You are not what fades, you are what remains." Time seemed to vanish. She didn't know whether moments or centuries passed. Her body grew lighter. as though she were being drawn inward, not into death, but into vastness. And then she saw them, thousands of tiny flames floating along the water, each one drifting, merging, separating like souls returning to a single light. In that instant, she realized, every flame was a heart that had awakened. Every light was a being who had once carried pain and then released it. The river was not made of water. It was made of consciousness, pure awareness, flowing through eternity. She closed her eyes and her breath became the river's song. A voice rose from the current, gentle, ancient, and infinite. Every life is a wave. Every death is the wave returning, but the ocean never dies. You have been stone and seed, flame and wind, child and sage, lover and wanderer. All of them were costumes worn by the same light. And now you remember. Anaya opened her eyes. The world around her shimmered like a reflection, real and unreal at once. She saw cities made of sound, forests woven from thought, skies painted by the rhythm of breathing stars. Everything was connected, a single, endless pulse. She realized there was no river. There was only flow. There was no dream. There was only awareness dreaming itself into forms. And in that moment of recognition, she laughed softly, freely. Her laughter echoed across realms, and where it fell, flowers of light bloomed. A figure appeared before her. Neither man nor woman, neither young nor old. It was the silent one, the keeper of the flame. He looked at her and said, "Welcome home, Anaya." She bowed deeply. "Is this the end?" she asked. He smiled, his eyes like the reflection of 1,000 dawns. "There is no end. There is only deeper remembering." He gestured toward the horizon, where the river melted into a sea of radiant mist. "What you see now is not another world. It is the same world finally seen without forgetting. Return if you wish. Walk among them. Carry the stillness as your speech and the light as your heart. When they see you, they will not understand what has changed, but they will feel peace because peace is what you are." As dawn approached, Anaya found herself standing once again by the same riverbank where she had first knelt. But everything was different, not in form, but in perception. The trees breathed, the sky hummed, the ground pulsed with quiet joy. She looked into the river's surface and saw not her reflection, but the reflection of all beings. Each face shimmered within the current, some laughing, some weeping, some still searching, some nearly home. And she understood. To awaken is not to escape the dream. It is to become the dream's awareness. That night, she built a small lamp from a hollowed stone and river reeds. She lit it with the flame of her own breath and placed it beside the water, right where the Silent One's lamp had once stood. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying her voice into the distance. May every soul who wanders here remember the river beyond dreams, not as a place to reach, but as the truth they already are. And somewhere deep within the night, a ripple began, soft, endless, radiant, as if the universe itself had just exhaled in peace. The river flowed on, and the dream continued, but now it was awake. Morning came quietly. The sky was painted in soft shades of gold and rose, and a cool mist drifted above the river. Anaya opened her eyes, feeling the earth breathing gently beneath her. The river was still there, flowing endlessly as before, but it was no longer just a river to her. It was a mirror of truth, a voice of silence, a reminder of what she had seen, that everything, even this world, was made of the same light. She sat for a long time, listening to the song of water and wind. Each sound was alive. Each moment was complete. There was nothing to chase anymore, nothing to resist. Just the soft rhythm of existence, like the universe breathing through her. When she finally stood up, her feet felt light, as though she were walking not on the ground, but with it. Each step seemed to awaken something gentle in the earth. The grass beneath her toes sparkled with dew. The morning birds began their calls, and even their songs seemed different, like messages of joy whispered by the unseen. Anaya began to walk back toward the world she had left behind. Not as a seeker now, but as one who had found what could never be lost. For many days she walked through villages and valleys. People saw her passing by, a simple woman in white robes, barefoot, carrying no belongings, her face calm and bright like sunrise after rain. Children followed her out of curiosity. Elders bowed their heads without knowing why. Even the animals seemed unafraid. Anaya never spoke much. When someone asked her where she came from, she simply smiled and said, "From silence." When they asked where she was going, she would look at the horizon and whisper, "Wherever the light leads." One evening, she reached a small village at the foot of a mountain. The people there were kind but weary. They worked hard in the fields, faced drought and sickness, and carried the heavy weight of survival. Anaya sat under a banyan tree near the edge of the village. She closed her eyes and began to breathe slowly. There was no intention, no effort, only peace flowing outward like invisible waves. By nightfall, a few villagers had gathered around her. They didn't know what they expected, but they felt drawn to her stillness. A child asked softly, "Who are you?" Anaya opened her eyes and said, "I am what you are when you stop trying to become." The people looked at each other puzzled, but the child smiled. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the calm that surrounded her, and somehow that was enough. Days passed and people began to visit her daily. Some came with questions about life and pain. Others brought food and water just to sit beside her quietly. She never gave long sermons. Sometimes she spoke just a few sentences, but her words carried weight, as if they came not from the mind, but from the heart of existence itself. One man said, "My wife is ill. I have prayed and prayed, but nothing changes." Anaya placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "The prayer you repeat is filled with fear. The prayer that heals is made of peace. Do not ask life to change. Ask your heart to open." The man went home silently, and though his wife's sickness remained for a time, something changed inside him. He became gentle. He became patient. And slowly his wife began to recover. An old woman came one afternoon and said, "My son went away to find work. I have not heard from him for many months. I can't stop worrying." Anaya smiled softly. "Every mother's heart is like the sky," she said. "Sometimes clouds cover it, but the sun you love is still there. Worry hides love. Let your love breathe, and your son will feel it wherever he is." The woman wept. She left lighter than she came. Weeks later, her son returned thin, tired, but safe. He said, "Mother, one night I felt your peace. It guided me home." As months passed, Anaya's presence became a quiet blessing. The village grew calmer. People stopped arguing over small things. Neighbors began sharing their food again. Even the children stopped fighting and played under the banyan tree where she often sat. It was as if her silence had washed over everything. No one could explain it, but they all felt it. One day, a young monk from a faraway monastery came to see her. He had heard rumors of a woman who shines without light. He bowed deeply and said, "Master, please teach me how to find what you have found." Anaya looked at him with kindness and replied, "You already have it. The treasure you seek is buried beneath your wanting. Be still long enough, and you will see it glowing inside you." The monk frowned. "But how can I stop wanting?" She smiled. "When you see that wanting itself brings pain, you will stop out of love, not discipline." He was silent for a long time, and then tears filled his eyes. He bowed again, and for the first time in his life, he felt peace. Seasons changed. The rains came and went, the trees shed their leaves, then bloomed again. Anaya stayed, teaching without teaching, speaking without words. Sometimes she walked alone in the fields at dawn, watching the mist lift over the crops. Sometimes she sat by the river, the same river that had once shown her the truth beyond dreams. She knew now that there was no difference between the sacred and the ordinary. Every breath was meditation. Every smile was prayer. Every act of kindness was enlightenment in motion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, a group of villagers gathered around her. They asked, "Master, what is peace? Can you describe it to us?" Anaya looked at them and said slowly, "Peace is not something you find. It is something you stop losing. It was with you when you were a child, when you looked at the sky without fear. It is with you now, when you breathe without reason. Peace is not in a temple or a book. It lives quietly in your own chest. You only need to stop running from it. The villagers sat silently, and for a long time no one spoke, but everyone felt it, a deep, wordless understanding. That night, as stars filled the sky, Anaya sat by the river again. She lit her small stone lamp, the same one she had made long ago, and placed it gently upon the water. The flame floated, reflecting on the calm surface. It was small, yet it glowed like a piece of eternity. She whispered to the night, "May this light reach all hearts, even those who have forgotten what they are." The river carried the flame onward, and as it drifted into the darkness, the stars above seemed to shimmer brighter, as if bowing in silent gratitude. And so the woman who had found the river beyond dreams became a river herself, flowing quietly through the hearts of all who met her. Her words turned into seeds of peace. Her silence became a temple. Her presence a reminder that the divine is not somewhere far away. It is the quiet within us, always waiting to be remembered. Years drifted by like clouds moving across a vast blue sky. The village that had once been heavy with worry was now filled with quiet laughter and easy kindness. People worked together, shared their food, and began their days by bowing to the rising sun. The banyan tree under which Anaya sat had grown thick and wide, its roots like ancient arms embracing the earth. Children played in its shade. Old men sat there to rest their bones. Women gathered to weave, singing softly as they worked. And through all of it, Anaya remained a calm flame at the center of their simple world. Her hair had turned white as river foam, but her eyes still carried the same light, the same wordless peace that could melt even the hardest sorrow. One night as the moon shone high, a young shepherd from a distant village dreamed of her. He had never met Anaya, never even heard her name. Yet in his dream she stood beside him on a field of stars. She said nothing, only smiled a smile that dissolved every fear inside him. When he awoke, his heart was trembling, but not with fear, with recognition. He felt as though something ancient within him had remembered its way home. The next morning, without knowing why, he forgave a neighbor he had hated for years. He shared his bread with a stranger. He looked at the world differently, not as a battlefield, but as a garden waiting to be cared for. And far away beneath her banyan tree, Anaya smiled in her meditation. Somewhere deep inside her, she felt a breeze, the kind that tells the heart, a seed has opened. Over time, others began to dream of her too. Farmers, travelers, merchants, monks. They all saw the same gentle figure, a woman standing beside a river, her lamp floating across the surface, her eyes filled with calm that seemed older than the sky. Some of them told no one, afraid their friends would laugh. But the dream changed them. It softened something inside. They began to listen more, speak less, and see the sacred in small things, the sound of rain, the warmth of tea, the kindness of a stranger. Others began to travel, searching for the woman of light. They came to the village, and when they found Anaya, they would bow in silence, not because she demanded it, but because their hearts told them to. She greeted each visitor with a smile, never claiming to be anyone special. "Sit," she would say softly, "let the earth breathe through you." And so they sat, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours, until tears came, until words were no longer needed. When they finally left, they carried her silence with them, like a secret flame that would never go out. As the years rolled on, those who had sat with her began to teach others. They didn't build temples or write scriptures. They simply lived with quiet awareness. One farmer started leaving a portion of his harvest by the roadside for hungry travelers. A merchant stopped cheating his customers and found joy in honesty. A mother began teaching her children how to breathe calmly when angry instead of shouting. They never said, "This is Anaya's teaching." They just lived it. And the village began to glow not with gold or grandeur, but with the soft light of human goodness. This light spread slowly, like dawn across the valleys. Villages miles away started to change too. No one could explain it, but people said, there is a peace moving through the land like wind you cannot see, but you can feel. Those who carried her silence in their hearts were called the Silent Ones. They had no robes, no titles, no followers. Yet wherever they went, the air seemed lighter. The world felt kinder. One day, a caravan of scholars and monks arrived from a far kingdom. They had heard of the silent woman whose stillness healed broken hearts. Their leader, an old monk named Jinwu, approached Anaya with great reverence. He said, "Master, we have studied scriptures all our lives. We have debated philosophy, recited mantras, and yet peace escapes us. Please teach us what you know." Anaya looked at them kindly and said, "What you seek is not in your scrolls or your voices. It is in the silence between them." The monks exchanged glances. One of them said, "But we meditate for hours every day." Anaya nodded. "Then perhaps it is not meditation you need to learn," she said softly, "but how to stop trying so hard to meditate." Jinwu's eyes widened. He bowed deeply. "Your words are simple," he whispered, "but they break through walls of thought like thunder." Anaya smiled. "Thunder does not break the sky," she said. "It only reminds the clouds to let go." For many days the monks stayed in the village, not to learn new lessons, but to unlearn old ones. They worked in the fields, shared food with the poor, and listened to the wind. When they left, they were changed. Their faces were lighter, their laughter genuine. And when they reached their monastery again, they didn't build more altars, they planted trees. Anaya grew older, but her peace only deepened. Sometimes she would sit by the river for hours, her reflection merging with the water, as if she had become part of it. People noticed something strange. Birds would gather around her, resting near her feet without fear. Even wild animals came close, drawn by an invisible calm. At night, travelers passing through the valley would see a faint light glowing near the banyan tree, like a single star resting on earth. They would whisper, "It must be her spirit keeping watch." And indeed, her presence was not limited by her body anymore. It moved freely through the dreams of the suffering, through the silence of seekers, through the soft laughter of children. Her peace had become part of the wind. One twilight, as the sky turned gold, Anaya gathered her students for the last time. They sensed something, a quiet farewell in her voice. She said, "My dear ones, you have all looked for truth outside yourselves. But truth is not found, it is remembered. When I am gone, do not cling to my words. Cling to your breath, for it is the same breath that moves through stars." Tears filled their eyes. "Master," one asked softly, "how will we know you are still with us?" Anaya smiled. "When you sit in silence and your heart feels vast as the sky, that is me. When you forgive before being asked, that is me. When you look at another and see no separation, that is me." She closed her eyes and the air around her shimmered. The birds grew still, the river slowed, the wind held its breath. Then only silence. But it was not the silence of loss. It was the silence of truth fulfilled. And from that silence, the world bloomed again. Her students continued to live as she had, teaching without words, healing without effort. The peace that had begun in one heart had now become a river of light flowing through countless souls. No temple was built for Anaya, because the true temple was everywhere, in the sound of wind, in the laughter of children, in the stillness between two heartbeats. And in every dawn, when the first light touched the river, it shimmered as if bowing in remembrance of the one who had shown the world how the silent ones speak. As the sun began to set over the mountains, painting the sky with shades of orange and violet, Master Kozin and his students gathered by the quiet pond near the rebuilt monastery. The air was still, and the only sound was the soft ripple of water caused by the evening breeze. The students sat in silence, their reflections shimmering on the surface of the pond. After a while, Kozin spoke gently, his voice blending with the calmness of the moment. "Tell me," he asked, "what do you see when you look into the water?" One student replied, "I see myself, Master, my face, my eyes, my robes." Another said, "I see the mountains behind us and the sky above." A third added, I see the ripples that make the reflection unclear. Kozin nodded and smiled softly. Yes, he said, and that is how the mind works too. The pond is like your consciousness. When it is calm, it reflects truth clearly. But when stirred by thoughts, emotions, or desires, the reflection becomes distorted. The students listened carefully. Kozin picked up a small pebble and dropped it into the pond. Tiny ripples spread out, bending the reflection of the moon that had begun to appear in the evening sky. Do you see? He continued. When the surface is disturbed, even the moon appears broken. But the moon itself is never broken. It remains whole and shining, untouched by what happens on the water. He looked at each of his students. In the same way, your true self, your inner peace, your awareness is never truly harmed by life's disturbances. What gets disturbed is only the surface of the mind. The deeper truth remains still and pure. One of the younger monks, who often struggled with anger and frustration, asked quietly, "But Master, how can we stop the ripples? How can we keep our minds calm all the time?" Kozin chuckled softly. You cannot stop the wind, can you? But you can learn to let it pass. The key is not to fight the ripples, but to stop identifying with them. When anger comes, see it as a wave. When fear arises, see it as another ripple. Do not dive into the water trying to fix it. Simply watch it until it fades. The monk thought for a while and then asked, "But what if the water never settles?" Kozin smiled gently. Then keep watching. Even the strongest wind must eventually rest. The more you practice watching without reacting, the faster the water clears. He stood up slowly and gestured toward the mountains. The world outside will always change. Storms will come and go, but within you lies a still lake that nothing can disturb. When you learn to rest in that stillness, you will find peace even in the middle of chaos. The student sat quietly, letting his words sink in. The wind had died down, and the pond now reflected the moon perfectly calm, whole, and shining. Kozin said softly, almost in a whisper, "This is your mind when you stop chasing thoughts. It becomes a mirror that reflects truth just as it is. Not what you wish it to be, not what you fear it might be, but what it truly is." As night deepened, the monks remained by the pond in silent meditation. The stars began to appear one by one, reflected in the still water. Each student could now feel the meaning of Kozin's words. Peace was not something to be found, it was something to be remembered. And in that moment, under the vast sky, they understood. The mirror of the mind does not need polishing. It only needs to be still. The next morning, the monastery was quiet except for the sound of soft footsteps moving through the courtyard. The sky was pale with the first light of dawn, and a cool mist drifted between the pine trees. The monks gathered in the meditation hall, sitting in neat rows on their cushions. A candle flickered at the front of the room, its flame steady and calm. Master Kozin entered silently and sat before them. For a few moments, no one spoke. The only sound was the rhythmic breathing of the monks. Then Kozin opened his eyes and said softly, "Today we will learn the breath of stillness, a way to return home to the quiet within you, no matter what happens outside." He looked around the room, his eyes kind but deep. "Many of you," he continued, "have learned to watch your thoughts, to observe your emotions like clouds passing in the sky. But when pain comes, when the body aches, or the heart feels broken, the mind often forgets everything and runs in panic. It resists, it fights, it says, this should not be happening. And that resistance is what keeps the pain alive." The monks listened closely. Some nodded, others sat completely still, absorbing each word. Kozin continued, "The breath of stillness is not about escaping pain. It is about resting so deeply in the present moment that even pain loses its power. When you breathe with awareness, you are no longer just a person experiencing suffering. You become the witness, the space in which all things rise and fall." He demonstrated by placing his hand gently on his chest. "Close your eyes," he said. "Feel your breath. Don't change it, just notice it. The breath moves in, the breath moves out. Between the breaths, there is a tiny pause, a gap so small you can almost miss it. That pause is stillness. That pause is peace." The hall grew silent. Even the candle flame seemed to listen. "Now," Kosen said. When pain comes, bring your awareness to your breath. Feel it flow through the place that hurts, whether it is your body or your heart. Do not say, I want it to stop. Instead, whisper inside yourself, this too belongs, and breathe. He paused and smiled softly. At first, you may feel the pain even more sharply, but if you breathe through it with kindness and curiosity, something mysterious begins to happen. The pain stops being an enemy. It becomes a messenger. It starts to speak to you. A monk raised his hand quietly. Master, he said, what does the pain say? Kosen's eyes shone like the morning sun touching the mist. It says, I am not here to hurt you. I am here to wake you. Every ache, every sorrow, every wound is a teacher in disguise, but you can only hear its teaching when you stop fighting it. He closed his eyes again and continued speaking slowly. Breathe in, feel the air touch your lungs. Breathe out, let go of all control. With each breath, remind yourself, I am safe in this moment. I am not the pain. I am the space in which it appears. Minutes passed in deep silence. The monks felt their bodies relax, their hearts open. Some felt tears on their cheeks, not from sadness, but from a quiet sense of release. When Kosen finally opened his eyes, he said, this is the breath of stillness. It does not remove pain, but it transforms your relationship with it. You stop being the one who suffers, and you become the one who understands. That is the beginning of true healing. He stood up slowly and looked out the window at the sunlight breaking through the mist. When the storm passes, the mountain does not complain about the rain. It simply stands, patient and strong. Be like the mountain. Let your breath be your ground, and let your stillness be your strength. The monks bowed deeply, and the sound of their movement echoed softly through the hall. The lesson of that morning would stay with them forever, not as words in their minds, but as peace in their breath. And as the day began, they carried that stillness into every moment, chopping wood, sweeping floors, cooking rice, each breath a reminder that even in pain, peace was never lost. Days passed peacefully in the monastery after Master Kosen taught the breath of stillness. The monks practiced it daily during meditation, while sweeping the courtyards, and even as they worked in the gardens. They began to notice small changes within themselves. Their minds felt quieter, their hearts lighter. But still, there was one emotion that continued to trouble many of them: fear. Fear came in many forms. Some monks feared illness or death. Others feared failing in their spiritual practice. A few feared losing the calm they had worked so hard to achieve. One evening, as the orange sun dipped behind the mountains, a young monk named Riku approached Master Kosen. His hands trembled slightly as he bowed and said, Master, I try to meditate every day. I breathe as you taught us. I try to let go of pain. But still, fear keeps returning. I am afraid of losing everything, my peace, my home, my life. How do I stop being afraid? Kosen looked at him for a moment, then gestured for Riku to follow. They walked quietly up a narrow path that wound around the mountain. The air was cool and smelled of pine and wet earth. Soon they reached a cliff that overlooked the valley below. The wind whistled softly through the trees. Kosen pointed to the edge of the cliff and said, Step closer. Riku hesitated. Master, if I go closer, I might fall. Kosen nodded gently. Yes. That is fear, the mind's voice saying, if I go too far, I might lose control. But come closer anyway. Just one step. Riku's heart pounded. His mind screamed for safety. Yet he trusted his teacher. Slowly he stepped forward until his toes were almost at the edge. His breath grew shallow, his legs shook. Kosen said softly, Now feel your fear. Don't run from it. Don't fight it. Just breathe. Riku closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For a moment he imagined himself falling, wind rushing past his face. Nothing to hold on to. But then something changed. Beneath the trembling and the panic, he felt something else: space. A strange stillness beneath the fear, as if the fear itself was floating inside a larger calm. Kosen watched him quietly, then said, Fear is not the enemy, Riku. Fear is simply the body's way of saying, wake up, you are alive. He continued. When you try to fight fear, it grows. But when you look directly into it, it begins to dissolve like mist when the morning sun touches it. Fear cannot survive awareness. Riku opened his eyes, still standing at the edge. But master, he said, what if my fear never goes away? Kozen smiled. Then you bow to it. You make it your teacher. You say, fear, thank you for reminding me that I am not in control of life, and I don't need to be. He sat down on a rock nearby, looking out over the endless valley. Surrender, he said softly, does not mean giving up. It means letting go of the illusion that you can control everything. It means trusting life, even when it feels uncertain. The master picked up a small leaf that had fallen nearby. He held it up to the wind and said, this leaf doesn't know where it will land. The wind may carry it to the river, or it may fall at my feet. But it does not resist. It trusts the wind. Can you do the same? Riku watched the leaf float away into the valley below, turning, gliding, and finally disappearing into the mist. Something inside him softened. He realized that all his fear came from trying to hold on to what could never be held, life itself. Kozen continued, the secret, my dear student, is this. Fear ends where trust begins. Not trust in fate, not trust in luck, but trust in the simple truth that whatever happens, you will still be part of this great mystery called existence. Nothing is ever truly lost. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of pine and smoke from the monastery below. Kozen closed his eyes and said, when fear visits again, and it will, don't push it away. Sit with it, offer it tea, listen to its message, then thank it, bow to it, and breathe it out. That is surrender. Riku bowed deeply, tears welling in his eyes. For the first time, he wasn't trying to push fear away. He was simply letting it exist without resistance. And in that simple act, fear began to fade, replaced by a quiet strength he had never felt before. As they walked back down the path, the sun had vanished, leaving behind streaks of violet and gold in the sky. The world felt vast, mysterious, and yet perfectly safe. That night, as the monks chanted in the dim light of the meditation hall, Riku sat silently, breathing slowly. The same fear that once felt like fire now felt like a cool wind moving through him, alive, but harmless. He finally understood. Surrender is not weakness. It is the deepest kind of courage, the courage to trust life completely. The days at the monastery flowed like the river that wound through the valley, quiet, unhurried, and full of hidden life. After the teaching on fear and surrender, the monks practiced meeting every emotion with awareness. Yet one question remained in many hearts. How do we let go completely? Even after fear faded, attachment lingered to comfort, to memories, to expectations. Letting go sounded beautiful in words, but in practice it felt like trying to open a clenched fist that had forgotten how to relax. One cool morning, the mountain air was wrapped in fog. The monastery bells echoed softly through the mist, calling the monks to the courtyard. There, Master Kozen stood near a small fig tree. He held a worn clay cup in his hand, simple, cracked, and faded from years of use. When everyone had gathered, he said, "This cup has served me for many years. It has held water, tea, and even flowers. But every morning, when I pour tea into it, I remind myself this cup is already broken." The monks looked puzzled. The cup seemed perfectly fine. Kozen smiled gently and continued, "To me, it is already gone. One day it will slip from my hand and shatter, or it will fade and crumble with time. But because I know this, I can use it fully, love it deeply, and never fear its end." He paused and let his words sink into the silence. "To let go is not to stop caring," he said softly. "It is to care so fully that you no longer need to cling." A young monk named Tenzin spoke up. "Master, how can we live this way? If we accept that everything will one day be gone, won't that make life feel empty?" Kozen turned toward him with a kind smile. "Ah, Tenzin, that is the great misunderstanding. When you let go, life does not become empty, it becomes full. When you stop trying to hold on to everything, your hands are finally free to touch what is here now." He lifted the clay cup, admiring how the morning light touched its surface. If I cling to this cup, I cannot see its beauty. My fear of losing it hides its perfection. But when I release the need for it to last forever, I see it clearly and I am grateful. That is true love without possession. The monk stood silently, listening to the distant call of mountain birds. The fog began to lift, revealing the gentle outlines of pine trees and stone paths. Kozin continued, "We think letting go means losing something, but in truth it means returning what was never ours to keep. We borrow everything: our bodies, our thoughts, even the people we love. Everything is a guest passing through our lives for a time. The wise do not close the door to keep them. They bow in gratitude when they leave." He began to walk slowly toward the monastery steps. "Imagine a stream," he said. "You cannot hold the water in your hands. The more tightly you try, the faster it slips away. But if you relax, the water flows over your palms, cool and alive. This is how life must be lived." One of the elder monks, who had been silent for most of the morning, said quietly, "Master, sometimes I fear that if I let go too much, I will stop caring. I will stop trying to improve myself, stop trying to serve others." Kozin nodded, understanding the heart behind the words. "Letting go is not about indifference," he said gently. "It is about trust. When you let go of control, love begins to flow naturally, without effort. You serve not because you must, but because your heart cannot help it. The flower does not plan to bloom, it just blooms." He stopped near the fig tree again and placed the clay cup on the ground. "Letting go," he said, "is the art of returning to flow. It is not the end of care, it is the beginning of peace." The monks bowed, their eyes glistening with quiet understanding. They could feel the truth of the teaching, not as an idea but as a living thing, something breathing in the wind around them. Later that evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, the monks gathered by the river. They began a simple ritual that Kozin had taught them, a practice of release. Each monk held a dry leaf in his hand, whispering into it something he was ready to let go, of fear, pride, longing, or pain. Then one by one they placed the leaves upon the flowing water and watched them drift away. The sight was mesmerizing. Dozens of small leaves floated down the silver-blue river, carrying with them invisible burdens. The sound of water over stones blended with the hum of evening crickets, creating a gentle song of surrender. Kozin stood at a distance, watching his students with deep compassion. He knew that letting go was not a single act, it was a lifelong practice. Each day, a little more loosened. Each breath, a little more released. As darkness settled over the valley, he whispered to himself, "Everything that comes must go. Everything that goes makes space for something new." That is the rhythm of existence, the dance of life and death, of holding and releasing. And in that quiet hour, the monastery seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the earth, steady, open, alive. That night, when the monks lay down to rest, they did so with lighter hearts. The sound of the river outside their windows reminded them, nothing lasts forever, and that is why everything is precious. As the final night settled over the monastery, the air was soft and cool. The mountain was wrapped in silver mist, and the sound of the river murmured like a lullaby beneath the stars. The monks had long gone to rest, their breath rising and falling in rhythm with the gentle pulse of the world. Only Master Kozin remained awake, sitting beneath the old fig tree. A candle burned beside him, its flame steady and calm. He watched it quietly, the way one might watch their own thoughts appearing, dancing, and fading away. He had lived many seasons on this mountain. He had known gain and loss, joy and sorrow, love and parting. But now all of it felt like waves that had finally reached the shore and dissolved back into the sea. The truth he had spent his life seeking was not hidden in scrolls or words. It was here in the silence between breaths, in the warmth of light on his face, in the stillness of simply being. He closed his eyes and smiled. "Peace," he whispered, "is not something we find. It is what remains when we stop searching." Above him, the wind moved gently through the trees. The candle flickered, then went out, not in sadness, but in perfect ease. After a time, the monk spoke softly. Master, you have taught us about impermanence, about stillness, about letting go. But when I lie awake at night, sometimes I still feel a quiet fear. The fear of not being enough, of disappearing. Kozen opened his eyes. The moonlight reflected in them like two calm lakes. Do you hear the stream, my son? The monk tilted his head. From somewhere beyond the courtyard came the faint murmur of water moving over stone. It flows endlessly, said Kozen, yet no drop of it tries to last. Each one appears, glitters for a moment, and then joins the next. None are lost, none are separate. The stream only seems to move, but in truth it is always whole. He turned toward the monk. You too are like that. You think you are a single drop, this body, this name, this life. But in truth, you are the stream itself. The fear comes only when the drop forgets it is water. The monk closed his eyes, feeling the words settle over him like a warm blanket. The night air brushed his face, his breath softened. The world seemed to slow, every sound stretching into stillness. Kozen's voice lowered to a whisper, calm, gentle, endless. When the mind grows quiet, the heart remembers what it has always known. You are not the waves, you are the ocean. You are not the clouds passing through the sky. You are the sky itself. The monk's shoulders relaxed. His thoughts, once darting like restless fish, began to drift. He could feel sleep approaching, not as an escape, but as a soft return, a homecoming. Kozen looked at the stars above. Look, he said softly, how even the stars rest. They shine without trying. They burn without effort. The universe does not strive to be beautiful. It simply is. He turned his gaze to the young monk, whose eyes were now half closed, his breathing slow and deep. When you sleep tonight, Kozen whispered, let go of who you think you are. Let your mind float like a leaf on the river. Let each breath carry you deeper into stillness. You do not need to reach peace, for peace has already found you. The monk nodded faintly, drifting. His last waking memory was of Kozen's voice blending with the wind's soft, steady, eternal. And then all was silence. The fireflies flickered across the courtyard. The moon climbed higher. The stream sang its gentle, endless song. Somewhere in the quiet heart of the night, even the old master closed his eyes. There was nothing left to seek, nothing left to learn. Only the infinite stillness breathing through all things. Sleep now, traveler, the world seemed to whisper. You are safe. You are home. You are the quiet beneath the stars.